Okay. So we will start the planning board meeting for Tuesday, November 10th, 2020. We are conducting this pursuant to the governor's orders, which allow for Zoom meetings of municipal boards. If anybody, this is being recorded by Zoom. If anybody else is recording it, that is fine. You just need to let us know. Anyone? Okay. As you may have seen, this gets put on to the town website, so you can actually listen to the audio later on as well, in addition to minutes that are prepared subsequently. All right, you know what, actually, before I start, and there's not a ton of people yet on here, but if you want to just start going into the chat and signing in with your name and address, that would be great. I'll announce that again when we get to that cell tower hearing. 7 o'clock, town planners report. Alan?
Yes, since our last meeting, I've had meetings with Val Chavets of Oak Ridge Custom Homes, and he has purchased the 85 acres off of Mort Mining, going towards the Connecticut town line that we've been talking about. And it includes 12 A&R lots, which they're possibly going to also get special permit for 2 estate lots. And then he's got a 65 acres for a potential subdivision in the future. He's actually the developer. He actually builds the homes and things also. I also had a field meeting with Randy Brown, John Goddard, and Cressy Construction. That's Sawgrass, the greens on the west side. They put their final top course on last Thursday. And what they like to do is go through the process of having the town accept it. So we created a punch list of some physical features that need to be addressed, such as the street signs, no outlet signs. They just recently replaced all the dead trees, which is good. And then also I told them the main thing, seems like we're having some problems with the legal information. The select board has to get what's called a meets and bounds description to accept that. And ultimately it will go to an annual town meeting for road acceptance. So I told them that that's something that they should really start working on right away. Also, I've had quite a few questions on different R40 zones, multifamily setbacks. People, there's some lots being offered. One of them is going to be on Hillside, just before you're going towards Westfield, just before you get to Will Palmer Road. It's on the right-hand side. And there's a lot on Nicholson Hill Road, for an example. And they're popping up here and there. I also continued aiding the residents and Verizon on their Verizon cell tower application with some additional changes, which I believe was put on the web page. And I think you were copied on that, Michael.
Wait.
Yes.
Wait, let me see.
And that's it.
Okay. All right. 7:05, public comments. Is there anybody who has something to bring to the board's attention that is not on the agenda for tonight? Okay. 7:10, 214 College Highway, McDonald's site plan modification.
Representative is supposed to be online to go over their proposal.
It's a few minutes or before.
You banana bread.
All right.
Basically, what I can start it off. McDonald's restaurant on College Highway, because of the demand for takeout. They only have, right now, they have one existing order line, and then they also have the one pickup line. Traffic has been backed up through the parking lot out towards College Highway. And what they would like to do is internally put a secondary order line in. It is still only going to have one pickup line. It's going to be in their existing parking lot. I haven't received any negative response from the fire or the police department. And the gentleman, they've been in queue for quite some time, waiting to get on. So we're basically trying to put it in place.
Yeah, I see. All right, Mr. Cranston.
There's a bit of a catch-22.
Yes.
Okay, you're unmuted there. Okay, you're here for McDonald's?
That is correct.
Okay. So I can pull up, if you wish, the rendering, or you tell me if you want me to pull up one of those. And if everybody could just make sure that they're on mute, that would be great.
Yeah,
Sure.
Ellen Freeman.
Yeah, no, it's fine now.
Could
All
I
right.
share my screen and just walk you through?
Yep, you can share your screen, certainly. Let me
Okay.
just switch that over. Hold on one second. All right, go ahead, Mr. Cranston, you can.
Great. Let me know when it pops up.
Yep,
There it
I can
is.
see it.
Okay, so Jim Cranston with Boulder, representing McDonald's. We're here before you to modify the existing drive-through that's on the site today. Today, there's a single menu board. That's the feature shown in red. And then really the blue represents where a car would park to take orders at the menu board. And the reason I point that out is under the proposed design, we're actually increasing the queue between the pay window and the menu boards, which actually helps provide more efficient operations. It gives them more time to get the food ready by the time they go to pick up the food at the window. So let me show now the proposed layout. This is just a color rendering of the site plan that was submitted with the site plan documents. This is called a side-by-side. You've probably seen these in other municipalities. It's literally two menu boards and they're parallel with one another. And really it's a convenience for customers, and it's really just a way more efficient operation. They've been around for years, and I think people are starting to realize, the operators, that it's just a better process for customers and for the employees. So what this does is it provides an additional spot for a car for queuing between the pay window and the menu boards themselves, which is here. But what it also does is it allows them to take orders. If somebody's parked at the inner lane here and they're, trying to figure out the order, they have a car full of kids, someone pulls up behind them. This gives them the opportunity to pull up to the second menu board and then also place their order as well. So it's a much more efficient operation. We would lose some parking, but end of day, we would still comply with zoning. We would end up with 44 spaces. And again, this is the proposed condition, what it would look like once the improvements were built.
You know what the minimum number of parking spaces was based on the?
44. There's a zoning table on the site plan.
Okay.
I can pull that up too if you'd like. I think it's based on the number of seats and then the number of employees. There's a calculation.
Actually had a question about that while you're pulling that up, Mr. Cranston.
Sure.
Lists the required as 44 and the existing as 53 with the proposed being 44. Where are those spaces being taken from? If you could highlight that for me.
Sure, one second. I just got kicked out of my computer. I'm still on through my phone, but bear with me 1 minute. I apologize. Okay, so your question was, where are we actually losing the spaces?
Yes, I couldn't quite tell that.
Okay. So I'm sorry, bear with me. I need to get back in. So what the issue is, I'm remoted into my work computer. So I need to get back in. But virtually today, there's more angled parking on the right side. You see where there's 4 parallel parking spaces to the right of the menu boards? Really, there's a whole row of parking there. So we're getting rid of several angled spaces, and then in order to make sure we do comply with zoning, we're replacing those with parallel spaces along the side.
In that same table, it indicates that you have the 3 existing accessible parking spaces. And Alan, I just want to make sure that are those supposed to be included in the grand total?
Yes, they are.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, so here's the site plan. Here's the table. It's 40% of the maximum allowable occupancy plus 1 space per employee at the peak shift. So utilizing the 80 seats and 12 employees, we end up with 44 spaces being required. And quite honestly, I'd be shocked if they ever even used 44 spaces out there at the site.
In this town, it's more often landscaping trucks and taking up multiple
Right.
spaces at once. So.
Yeah, so I'll go back to the site plan. So this is the demo plan. So there's 6 angled spaces at the back in front of the trash enclosure. Those would go away and become parallel spaces. And there's 10 angled spaces over here. So that's where we're ending up losing parking. The good news is it's not prime parking. Those are probably the least desirable spaces, and those would probably be used by the employees.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Cranston?
No, nothing other than, this layout is extremely common. This is their preferred layout. It's how they've been doing it all across New England. And, just again, operationally, this is working well for them.
Is the only thing really changing the bump out and then the alteration to the parking spots in the top right and the top? Is the remainder of it staying
Yep,
basically the same?
staying the same. Just again, there was a remodel. There was
There
a remodel and digital menu boards that were put in not too long ago. The ADA should be in full compliance. So we're literally just manipulating the drive-through.
Okay. Okay, and there's no change to handicap spots, or are there changes to that?
Nope, there are no changes.
Okay. Any other questions by the board? Okay. Let me just pull up. Alan, this is just on for a site plan modification?
Yes, there is no different, there is no change in use. It's just a on-site site plan modification.
Right, okay. Do I hear a motion to grant the site plan modification?
Marcus Phelps, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Dave Spina, second.
I will do a roll call vote. Michael Doherty, aye.
Marcus Phelps, aye.
Dave Spina, aye.
Dave Sutton, you there?
Dave Sutton, aye.
Thank you. Okay. So that's all set, Mr. Cranston.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. So 7 15, open space for the Greens East discussion. So if you recall, at the last meeting, it was brought to our attention that when the folks over there went to go do a conservation restriction, there was a question about whether there was public access allowed to the open space at the Greens East. Our town council had reviewed the decision and wasn't entirely clear from the decision which way that was supposed to go. So had sort of sent it back to us to address that issue and figure out, whether that should be public access or not. So I have, and certainly folks can look at if they want to, the decision that we issued. It doesn't, we had to deal with a waiver because there's that portion about park space, or, I forget what the exact phraseology is, but recreation and park space. And there was a waiver for that that was given so long as they allowed passive recreation in the open space, but it doesn't talk about whether it's publicly accessible or not, or just to the residents. As I mentioned last time, the thing that at least gave me a little bit of pause was that the Conservation Commission had represented that during a walkthrough early on, there was a representation that that public access would be allowed to the open space. And so that wasn't brought up at any planning board meeting. It certainly wasn't something that we knew about.
Right.
But that was my only concern, is whether because of that there should be at least a discussion about whether public access should be allowed. From what I've been told today, it sounds like the Conservation Commission is not pushing that. I don't think that we are bound by what they have done, but they have decided to sign the conservation restriction that doesn't allow public access. So I still think they need to take our guidance as to what is supposed to be in there. But it, by taking that act, it sounds to me like they're not pushing for public access as they generally were before. So I'll open it up to the board if anybody wants to discuss it or see the decision. I can pull that up and share a screen if you want, but just let me know. Any board members have any input into this?
Marcus Phelps here. For the record, I did review our minutes from May 7th, May 28th, and June 11th, when we talked about this definitive subdivision plan, and there was no mention that we would require them to provide public access to the open space. So I'm certainly willing to say no public access. I think the town benefits from the open space indirectly through the stormwater protection that it provides, wildlife habitat it provides, and the scenic aspects. So I think what we're allowing the developer to be able to do is certainly offset by the open space they're providing.
Okay. Any other board members have any comments on this?
I'll just concur with what Marcus just said. Yeah, I don't recall a specific discussion about allowing public access, but I think what Marcus said as far as the town indirectly benefits, and that public access not being required, I'm on board with that.
All right, and this is certainly something we need to independently, regardless of whether conservation comes to us or not, is sort of at least maybe have this more in the forefront of our minds when we deal with, developments going forward. There's arguments both ways on it, and it probably going to be dependent on the property as to whether it's useful to allow public access or not. But there's probably going to be some developments where that is a useful thing. I mean, as I think I said a meeting or two ago, that, there are a couple in town at least that have public access. And others do not. But maybe we should think more about, what the criteria we want for that as we come up to future developments. All right, so we certainly I don't think we need to do anything formal. Does everybody agree that that public space will not be part of, that we're not going to recommend that public access be part of the conservation restriction for Greens East?
So agreed.
I agree.
Okay. So we'll just, shoot a memo over to town council, or Alan, if you could just email Mark Beglane and David Schreier, and just let them know that, it's the position of the planning board that public access isn't necessary for the Greens East open space.
Okay, I can do that. Just to keep in the back pocket, there are two open space tongues that come down to College Highway, and they're approximately 80 feet wide, which could each one of them could easily support 6 cars, because there's no parking really allowed on town roads. But I just kind of let that lie there, because it's something, if we were forced to do something, that wasn't another alternative.
Right. And now that's just going to end up to be open space,
Yes.
abutting John Wally's property,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, where the old snack shop used to be.
Right. Okay. All right. I think that resolves that. Why don't I'm just going to pull up and share the draft minutes. Why don't we go over that now, since I just want to make sure that everybody can get on before the cell tower hearing, and we do have a few more minutes. So let me pull that up. I sent out the email with them attached last night, and I think Jessica's made a few changes, and I'll pull up her version, but hopefully you got a chance to look at what I sent out. Give me 1 minute and I will pull this up here.
Michael, Richard Utzinger is with us now.
Yep, I saw that.
Actually, Marcus, I'm in Florida, but I'm here.
Yeah, I figured you could get online even from Florida.
No, I called my computer kid back in Southwick, works for Wally Computer. Call him.
All right, let's see here. Share the minutes. All right, everybody can see that? You guys good? Yeah?
Yeah,
Yes.
good.
Okay. So, did you not accept it, Jessica, or are these? Oh, no, okay, never mind, you did. Wait.
What
Yeah,
you what you
you did.
see, I think some of the ones in blue are the ones that I
Yep, okay, so you accepted mine.
Yep.
and
I
then-
accepted all of your stuff and my old stuff and added some new stuff.
Perfect, okay.
Corey, thank you. Thank you.
So,
Understand.
go through this.
I'm here to speak on setbacks. I'm here to speak on setbacks.
I think I spelled George's name correctly, though I could be wrong.
Never know.
All right. So did everybody get a chance to go through? Let me just see what else we. Let me put. All right. Yeah, so those are, okay. Do I hear, everybody get a chance to look at these?
Yep.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the minute for October 6th of 2020?
Marcus Phelps, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Nutsinger second.
Okay,
Nutsinger second.
thank you. We'll do a roll call vote. Michael Doherty, aye.
Marcus Phelps, aye.
Nutsinger, aye.
David Sutton, aye.
Dave Spina, aye.
Okay.
Jessica Thornton, I, sorry.
All right. All right, so let me stop that. So Megan, if you could just accept Jessica's changes there and throw those electronic signatures on the end. I'm not even sure we had a signature block, but just pop one in with the electronic signatures.
No, the way the town clerk wanted it written up was like how I sent it to you, just that they're accepted electronically. That's how she told me to put them.
Okay, just make sure it has today's date then. Is everybody comfortable? Everybody agree that their signature can be put on electronically?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So Megan, I may have taken that out. So put it back in and just put today's date on it and that'll be fine. Okay.
Yep, no problem.
All right. I'll just remind everybody, if you haven't already, please sign into the chat with your name and address if you can, so that we have sort of a sign-in sheet as we normally would. This is being conducted in town hall. I think there might be a couple people on the phone. If you wouldn't mind just speaking up and just letting me know your name and address, that would be great.
Mike Grasso, 3 Mockingbird Lane.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else on the phone? Okay. So we will start 7:30 p.m. the continued Verizon cell tower public hearing. So there is additional materials that have been put up on the website. There is the one thing that did not get put up on the website because of technical issues is an appraisal that was submitted. We are trying to work through those technical issues and to get that up on the website. So they certainly, Verizon can certainly speak about it and summarize it or do whatever they wish about it. But everyone will have an opportunity to take a look at it and go through it once we're able to get it up on the website, which I'm hoping will be soon. So, but everything else that was supplementally submitted has been put up on the website. There is if you go to the planning board page, there's a hyperlink there to go to all the materials. As I have in the last couple, I'll let Verizon do, a brief presentation about the supplemental materials that they want to offer to us. And then I know there are a couple of residents who had presentations they wanted to make this evening. So I'll go to them and then we can kind of go from there. So why don't I first turn it over to Attorney Fenton to sort of guide where Verizon wants to go this evening.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Can you hear my audio okay?
I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. My name is Attorney Michael Fenton. I'm a partner at Schatz, Schwartz & Fenton. Our address is 1441 Main Street, Suite 1100 in Springfield, Massachusetts, 01103. I'm joined by my colleagues, attorneys Ellen Fryman and Stephen Sobey, as well as the full complement again, Mr. Chairman, of Verizon Wireless's team, including our consultants. So we're joined tonight by Jay Latore and Kip DeVito, our radio frequency experts. Sylvester, our architect and engineer from Hudson Design Group, as well as Dean Gustafson with All Points Technologies, our wetlands consultant, and David Vivian, our site acquisition specialist. So, Mr. Chair, as you indicated at the last hearing on October 20th, there was extensive testimony from the board, Verizon Wireless, the applicant, as well as the public. And in response to some of that testimony, Verizon Wireless produced last week our second round of supplemental filings with the board. And so what I'd like to do is just summarize those items for you. And then, Mr. Chair, if there's any questions, or we'll follow the guidance of the board in terms of however you would like to go over this supplemental due diligence. So the first item that I'd like to speak to is an updated engineering necessity case. This document bolsters Verizon's already existing and supplemented radio frequency testimony based on questions from the planning board. Specifically, the following revisions to the record have been made. Radio frequency maps have been added to more clearly depict the proposed coverage in Suffield, Connecticut. An analysis has been added to demonstrate why Suffield, Connecticut is not a suitable location for a wireless telecommunications facility to solve the coverage gap in Southwick. Radio frequency maps have also been added to more clearly depict the anticipated coverage in town. When we met a few weeks ago, Mr. Chair, there was some extensive discussion about coverage, and we huddled up afterwards and asked that our radio frequency experts prepare this map for you to show only the coverage that would be coming from this tower to make it more clear from a visual standpoint exactly the benefit that the town would see from this installation. The updating engineering case study also includes testimony and analysis regarding the inability of Verizon to co-locate on existing facilities. And we did perform an FAA database search to assess all existing structures. The second updated document is an updated alternative facilities analysis. This was updated to describe Verizon's assessment of what I will call the LaCorey property, which was talked about at the last hearing, as well as the American Legion. And I want to make this point clear too, all other properties within the wireless telecommunications overlay district in this area of town. So we have evaluated each and every one that would be within our coverage gap area and suitable for RF. And we've provided that testimony to you. We also provided, at the board's request, a written testimony statement from Mr. Latore, which in detail describes Verizon's definition of search area ring, and specifically the variables that go into determining what geographic area we target from a radio frequency standpoint before entering into any leases or doing any additional due diligence. We also have submitted an appraisal from Bennett Franklin Realty Services. They're based in East Long Meadow. They're expert in this field. Mr. Franklin and Mr. Bennett have prepared the certified appraisal that we submitted to the board. And the appraisal was intended to assess whether or not there would be any potential impact on property values in the neighborhoods and areas surrounding the proposed development, if and when the tower is built. And their professional and certified opinion is that there would be no diminution in value as a result of the installation of this tower. To reach that conclusion, they looked at comparable sales in the town of Southwick, particularly properties that have a visual impact on a residential basis with a wireless tower. Lastly, we submitted updated zoning drawings prepared by Hudson Design Group, and these revised drawings incorporate the tree survey that we have obtained through discussion with the board from Cotton Tree Service. So the tree survey clearly identifies the height and location of towers of trees rather, to enable us to more accurately describe to the board the tree clearing that'll take place. As a result of that survey, we are able to very specifically identify the amount of clearing that will need to happen. And I want to point out to the board that we have substantially reduced the proposed clearing at the entrance to the site. And that amount of tree clearing is now reduced to 20 feet, which is a substantial revision of the drawings from the last meeting that we had based on the feedback we received. So, Mr. Chair, that completes the second supplemental submission of Verizon Wireless. All of our consultants are here and ready to present on any of those materials or any questions that you have. I don't want to monopolize the time, so I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Before I turn it over to the members of the public, was there anything that you wanted to have, Mr. Latore or anybody else offer now before we start to get into that, or do you want to just wait and respond?
Well, I think that there's two things I'd like to highlight, if you would allow us to, Mr. Chair. I'd like Mr. Latore, if you could walk the board through the new radio frequency maps that you've provided. Most particularly, the one I'm interested in, Jay, is the map that shows just the Southwick Southeast site turned on. And then after that, Sylvester, if you could show the new slides on, the new sheets on the zoning drawings reflecting the reduced tree clearing. I think those are the two things that would be most beneficial for the board to see.
Sure. Thank you, Attorney Fenton. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board, and members of the community of Southwick. This is Jay Latore representing Verizon Wireless, home address 122 Forest Hills Road in Springfield. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I know sometimes, yeah, it looks like it's going to work fine. Mr. Chairman, if you could just let me know if you could see my screen.
I can.
Great, thank you. So as Councilor Fenton mentioned, we did add some additional due diligence to the radio frequency justification documentation. In the interest of time, I'm not going to step through the whole document again. I'll just highlight the changes that Attorney Fenton previously mentioned here. This slide here shows the coverage that is proposed to be generated from the proposed facility that is before you tonight for consideration. This slide only shows the coverage from that proposed facility, and I agree with Councilor Fenton that it helps provide a better visual depiction of the full proposed coverage from the facility. All facilities and wireless networks are designed to have a strategic amount of overlap between them. That's what enables you to go from site A to site B to be able to maintain your call or your data session without dropping service. The proposed facility does a good job of eliminating the coverage gap, substantially improving insufficient service in the southeast portion of Southwick, and is designed in such a manner as to provide necessary overlap with other facilities without creating unnecessary interference with other facilities. These next two slides are really a representation of what I just showed the meeting here, but it's just a more zoomed in view around the proposed facility. This is the existing coverage with all of the other facilities that are currently in service turned on, but with the zoom in, you don't see the other facilities. And if I step to the next slide, you see the significant improvement in coverage that the proposed facility will bring to the town of Southwick, particularly those areas which today only have reliable outdoor service. And with this proposed facility, it does a good job of moving much of those areas into reliable indoor service. And I'll just step through that once more. Mr. Chairman, Councilor Fenton didn't mention this in his initial statement, but I'll briefly touch on it. I know in one of our last meetings, there was a discussion about how Verizon can provide estimates of the total number of residents that could be covered by the proposed facility. And I just wanted to show you a quick visual depiction of how we do that. So it's the same planning tool that we've used in all of our previous simulations. And you can see all of the existing facilities that Verizon currently has a presence on, as well as the proposed facility here in the middle. The difference is that instead of showing radio frequency coverage, what I'm actually doing is showing the census tracts based on the 2010 census. And there's a legend down here that is used to color in these census tracts based on the population density in the particular areas of that tract. And so I know that some of the discussion was of interest. There was interest in learning a little bit more about, where inhabitants are within the town. In particular, I know one of the discussion items was looking at Verizon's Gamma sector, which points almost west, and there was interest in better understanding why that sector in particular might be prone to providing service to more customers than any of the others. And this map does a good depiction of it, and it's based on the fact that here in part of the town, north of Congamon, there is a little higher concentration of residences. And again, this is based on the 2010 census. Additionally, there was a lot of discussion during the last meeting regarding whether or not the town of Suffield, Connecticut was a viable alternative location for a wireless communications facility to try and eliminate the existing coverage gap within the town of Southwick. This slide was added to the presentation, and what we're showing is, again, the existing coverage from all of the surrounding facilities. But in this particular map to the right, you only see the proposed facility as well as that one facility in Suffield, which is a couple miles south of where our proposed facility is currently situated. I drew this rectangular, a red rectangle here to try and give you kind of a stare and compare between Google Earth, a bird's eye view, and Verizon's, depiction of its existing coverage. And what you find is that, and as we've talked about before, the siting of wireless communications facilities needs to be done in such a way that you are substantially eliminating coverage gaps, you're substantially improving areas where there's existing insufficient service today, and you're also doing so in such a way as to avoid unnecessary overlap that can result in a reduction in quality of service. What you see here is that our proposed facility is well located within and near some of the areas where some of the poorest level of service exists in the southeast portion of Southwick. And in the town of Suffield, Connecticut, not only is the majority of this northern portion of the town well covered by the existing facility further south, but the small stretches of area where there is coverage that would not be reliable for indoors, it lines up pretty well with, for the most part, open farmland, roads that would still have reliable service within a vehicle. You then get back into the town of Southwick, and our facility does a great job not only of eliminating the coverage gap, but again, part of the proposed facility's benefit is that we're taking areas where there are residences where today indoor service is not reliable, and we're able to provide reliable indoor service, which is an important part of the design of wireless communication networks. Attorney Fenton, I'll stop sharing so you can hand it over to Sylvester.
Thanks, Jay. That was very thorough. Sylvester, if you wouldn't mind just walking the
So that
board
same checkways is on.
Go ahead, Sylvester.
Attorney Fenton, could I ask a question?
We're just going to wait and let them finish their presentation, and then we can get into public comments.
Very good.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, so this page, which is C3, well, we all seen C3?
Yes.
Well, I'm just gonna start and
Yep.
I'm gonna start with C2 actually. This is where we took the trees were surveyed. We are showing diameters of the tree sizes. I can zoom in. And the species of the trees, which they comprise mainly of pine maple. And on the next page, we're showing the trees on the site plan, which is C3. We're showing the trees that will actually be removed, and then the ones that are not going to be removed. This basically is the entire site from the beginning at Liberty Lane all the way to the compound. Compound remains at 70 by 70 foot clearing. The road itself from the beginning to the end is 20 feet wide clearing. We have a sheet C6, which shows an aerial map with the forest, the wooded area, and the actual tree clearance. Road 12 foot wide and tree clearance being 20 feet all the way from the beginning to the end of it. A road that's 1,200 feet long. And that's it on the tree clearance.
Thank you, Sylvester. So, Mr. Chair, that's it for us, and respond to any questions you might have.
Okay. Let me just, before I turn it over to the couple folks who have presentations, do any board members have any questions on that supplemental presentation that was given by Verizon?
I'm curious how we went from needing 80 feet of clearance at the entranceway to now it's down all the way to 20 feet. How are we, if you needed that clearance before for safety purposes, for construction equipment, how is that now no longer needed?
So we went back and we revised the speed limits that were used. Previously we'd used 45 because the road itself doesn't have a posted speed limit. So we just went with a higher number, which is 45 miles an hour. And we've reduced that speed, which will reduce that clearance triangle at 25 miles an hour. And that's why we ended up at 20 feet clearance. I mean, it's always better to have a larger clearance and you trim it towards the end of your final design.
What? It's not even that.
It's
Okay, it just seems like an awfully strange contention. It
Say?
just seems very perfect. My other questions, though, were in regards to the assessment or the appraisal document, excuse me. I read through it and I can understand all the data as presented and can appreciate the professional opinion. But I went myself and spoke with some local realtors, and all of them come up with pretty much the same answer, being that while a cell phone tower doesn't always directly affect the market value when it first is placed on the market, the first big issue is a sizable reduction in the buyer pool. And I think when talking about such a neighborhood, when you have people looking for a higher quality suburban neighborhood, this is going to affect that pool greater than, say, a neighborhood that has homes that are a much lesser value. The second part of that is that once you reduce that buyer pool, you are creating a lengthier on-market time frame that often leads to a reduction in sale price. So while I appreciate the appraisal document put forth, I don't necessarily feel like it addresses all the residents' concerns and my concerns and representing them. I think that's all I have for now.
Any other board members? Okay. I will turn it over to Corey Rowland first, but let me just offer one thing before we get to her, if I could. And let me just pull it up here. There have been a number of questions related to the process of leasing this property and all the steps that Verizon took to get to this point where they're in front of the planning board. So I just wanted to, having gone through it a little bit, just give a quick little snapshot of it to hopefully give some folks an understanding as to what happened, and understand the process. So sorry, I'm just trying to pull up so I have all the documents here. So the wireless district was first discussed and initiated back, around 99, 2000. The wireless overlay district, which was the result of the discussions, was approved at town meeting by a 2/3 vote in 2001. That's what led to both the bylaw that you see, which is 23.1, as well as the map that you see that has particular properties in the wireless overlay district. As I didn't even live in town at the time, I can't give you any more information about that and what was discussed. But it was getting close to 20 years ago now that has been in place. In late 2016, early 2017, Verizon approached the select board about utilizing the property that we're talking about for a cell tower. The select board put out an RFP, which is what they need to do for town-owned property, to invite bids in basically for use of that property. Ultimately, Verizon was selected for use of that property. Now, the authority to put out the RFP was voted on at town meeting. It was in May of 2017. You can actually go on the website if you want, and I think it's in the clerk's office. There's a link to old town meetings. You can pull up the documents and take a look at it if you want. But in May of 2017, there was a majority vote at town meeting to approve or to give authority to the select board to put out an RFP. So the RFP was accepted for Verizon. They worked through, whatever needed to be worked through with town council, and a lease agreement was executed. In, I think it was earlier, January of this year, I believe. January of this year. So they ultimately came to terms and executed the lease agreement earlier this year. I think the issue, and I could be wrong, and I can certainly be corrected by the select board members who are here, but I think they had to work through some of the issues with the property and that access property to get to the point where they could, sign a lease agreement. So I think that's what's time to get there with town council involved. So that, is where we get to. In April, I believe, Verizon submitted their application for this special permit, which is what they need to do. That got delayed, obviously, because A, we weren't having meetings for a little while, and then B, I don't know how other people felt, to be honest with you. I certainly had some hesitancy to open up a hearing like this, of this size, by Zoom until there was some comfort level there. So that didn't get opened up until, obviously, we first opened this up in the fall. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, where this went, just so that everybody understands sort of where the process was. So let me turn it over to
Michael, could I ask a question? I noticed a representative from the police department, and I hate to throw them under the bus, but in all of our conversations so far, public safety is the utmost thing that we strive for. And I didn't know Officer Siegel wanted to mention that before we lose him or not.
If there's an issue with timing, I'm happy to let Officer Siegel speak right now, and then we can move on to Ms. Rowland. But Mr. Siegel, Officer Siegel. He's
on mute.
Yep, no, he's all set, I think.
Yeah, the cell phone towers, could be very good for the police and fire communications, town communications. We are lacking in dead spots around town, and currently our communications are on telephone poles. So if Verizon works with us to put our communications equipment up on their pole, that would be very good for us to increase our coverage too.
Okay, just Officer Siegel, do you know where that stands? I know there was some, I know you guys submitted specifications. I know that was taken back by Verizon. I just didn't know if there was any further communications between you and Verizon as far as, or the police department and fire department and Verizon as far as, if there was any agreement as to what would be put up there and where it would be put.
There was some specifications that were put forward. They required some drawings and a list of our equipment that was submitted. I believe Chief Bishop has been in contact with Attorney Fenton, and he could probably bring you up to date on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Hey, Mike, could I ask a question?
I can't see who's speaking, but
Dave, do you mind holding off until the presentation's done by Corey, please?
And that's what I was going to say, is that I've told a couple folks that we're going to allow some presentations, and I would like to get to that before we get into public comments. But everybody will have the opportunity to ask the questions and offer the comments when we get to that point. So I don't know, Chief Bishop, did you want to just tie this
Yes,
up?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Yes, as Officer Siegel did indicate, any cell phone towers that, since I've taken over as chief, definitely interest the Southwick Police Department. We were able to put one up on the Sodom Mountain cell phone to increase our coverage in that area of town. We are very interested in this town. I have had contact with Mr. Fenton, explained to him our desires and our needs. No promises have been made because they don't have any obligation to say where our radio equipment is going to go on their antenna. Their needs do have to be met first. So really, we're just in a waiting situation now to see if approval is done, to see if it is feasible to put our equipment on at that point in time. Of course, like anybody else, we ask and beg to be at the top of the tower, but that is not obligated by the town bylaw. It's just they're supposed to provide space for us. So, but anytime that we can get our equipment up onto a higher thing in our community, it is very beneficial to the public safety of our community.
Okay, Chief, if I could, just in case you have to go later, do you have off the top of your head, do you know how, were you looking for a whip antenna to go on top of that?
Believe it or not, I'm gonna have to refer that back to Officer Siegel. He's my technical guy. Officer Siegel, if you're still on, sir.
Yeah, we submitted specifications for a whip antenna, possibly two, and a microwave dish to facilitate communications back and forth to the headquarters.
Do you have a sense, as you sit here, what the height of that whip antenna would take it up over the tower?
I believe those whip antennas range anywhere from 8 to 20 feet.
Okay.
Depending on which one is used, which one is preferred. I don't remember what the specifications were. I believe Verizon has those.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to
Those would be, I believe, under the 20 feet.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to get your sense of what you recalled about that. Thank you. All right, so Corey Rowland, now I've lost you, but I'm sure you're on here.
Do you have to tell me that you have to give me the permission to share screen, or do I just share screen?
I think you can just share screen. I think you're allowed to.
Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate the time to present our position. We thought it would be more efficient if we presented a unified summary versus many individual comments. However, we obviously prepared this before Verizon's additional update.
You're breaking up a little bit. If you get a little closer, maybe to the mic, or.
I am on top of it.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's better.
Okay, we thought it would be more efficient if we presented a unified summary versus many individual comments. However, we obviously prepared this before Verizon's update this evening, so we may have a couple of addendum comments at the end of this. This presentation is about 25 minutes. It took many people several hours to create, so we do ask that questions and comments be saved until the end. This was prepared on behalf of the residents of the Liberty, Patriots, Lexington, Deer Run, and surrounding streets for the residents against the cell tower in our neighborhood. The purpose of the presentation is to tell you who we are, what's at risk for us, what challenges we have to the proposal, and what we are asking of the planning board. But first, we'd like to introduce ourselves. Perhaps the best way to start is by saying who we are not. We are not lot number 92-23 or the abutters or voices on a Zoom meeting. We are a blend of families, some raising young children, others doing their best with the teenage years, and some have raised our children here from youth to adult, sending them off to make their way in the world while we plan to someday cash in on our hard-earned home equity and enjoy retirement. We're parents, professionals, retired educators. Many of us built these homes. So why did we move here? We moved here for a quiet neighborhood, a neighborhood where we were told the wooded area was open space beginning when Patriots Way went up in 1994. Owners who built in the surrounding streets years later were told nothing can be built there. We moved here for the chance to raise our children in a safe place where you can see wildlife come out of the woods, and you can even walk in the evening safely after dark. And the only thing you have to worry about is this guy. We moved here because of the beautiful wooded backdrop in the center of our neighborhood. Woods that have become as much a part of this neighborhood as its residents. Woods where children can play or bike along trails marked by our Boy Scouts. Woods that will be invaded with a very dangerous eyesore. For the opportunity to live in this idyllic, affluent area, we pay our fair share, approximately 6% of the town's property taxes, equaling more than $1 million in annual revenue raised for the town, despite having private sewers and private trash pickup. What's at risk for us? A lot. We submitted this respected research from the National Institute of Science, Law, and Public Policy that shows that 94% of people surveyed would be less interested and would pay less for a property located near a cell tower or antenna. 79% of those surveyed said under no circumstances would they ever purchase or rent a property within a few blocks of a cell tower or antenna. We know that the Planning Board and Selectmen said they wanted to see local research. I have conducted or commissioned market research for 20 years for small companies with revenues of 10 million and large companies with revenues over 50 billion. National studies such as this are valid, especially with such high percentages of consensus amongst those surveyed. While we agree that local information provides specific context, it does not negate national research, nor would it move the needle much against a high percentage.
Lori?
You're just going in and out a little bit. So you might want to just try to adjust your mic a little bit. Sorry to interrupt you.
Or Michael, have people go to mute because we have 53 people on, and so whomever can go on mute, it would be better to do that also.
So
Yeah,
the last thing I
could be on
said
mute.
was, while we agree that local information provides specific context, it does not negate national research, nor would it move the needle much against a high percentage. And for the record, if elected officials feel that local research is so necessary, then why did they not commission this research on the impact of the tower against home values and buyer pool before they signed the lease with Verizon to complete a comprehensive tax revenue versus lease revenue comparison to share with the town? I'm confident it would have shown more property tax loss than the $21,000 annual lease revenue, although I'm not as confident that our property taxes would go down when our property values did. However, we did find local appraisal companies to comment on the value of homes with towers. JRG Appraisal notes the negative impact on both sale price and time to sell in their letter. I'll turn it over for a minute to Jeff King to discuss the letter and conversation he had with Commonwealth Appraisals. And Jeff, you'll probably have to unmute.
Let me see if I can grab. Yep, Jeff.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. So I went to the Commonwealth Appraisals, spoke to Dario. He's been an appraiser for 31 years in this area. He wrote up this letter. He went out and actually spoke to the bank underwriters to find out exactly how much more work it would take to get an appraisal based off of having a cell phone tower in a neighborhood. And obviously, we're going to give you copies of this presentation in this letter. But in the letter, it basically says, yes, it will cost a lot more. It will take a lot more effort, more work on regards to the underwriters and the banks and the appraisers to sell a house when there is a Verizon or a cell phone tower in the neighborhood. And the way he pointed it is, the way he described it is, if you walk out your front door, your back door, you look to your right, left, if you can see the cell phone tower, then your house is affected. He basically, I then went on and asked him, said, listen, if I hire you to appraise my house today, what will it cost? And he said, $500. And I said, once the cell phone tower is up, what will it cost? And he said it could be double or even more in regards to it, because it's a lot more work. He did say the house values will come down. He would not give me a price on that. He said, but it does add a lot more stress to buyers, sellers, real estate agents, and the banks, just because it's more work in regards to the whole process. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So what else is at risk? Our way of life and safety. The proposed road before the gate will be long enough to allow for 4 cars to park. Cleared trees invites more partying and mischief in the woods. Just ask those who live next to Robinson State Park in Agawam. This risks safety as it's easier to get into the woods under cover of darkness, especially if a family is not home for the night or for the week. It leaves cars and homes vulnerable. And we've already had situations all summer with cars being broken into. On Liberty Lane, the road would be in the elevated part of the woods, allowing people to see into the second floor of homes. The most concerning issue is that of fire. There are several instances of cell tower fires, the most recent in June of this year. The risk of an out-of-control fire increases when the tower is near many trees or a natural gas line. The proposed tower in our neighborhood has both of these concerns: lots of trees to catch fire and a natural gas line that runs very close to the woods. By the way, they collapse too. What else is at risk? Our health. Although the telecommunications lobbyists were successful in getting Congress to prevent refusal of a tower for health reasons in 1996, and I want everyone to stop and think about that. Verizon and its competitors allegedly worked to convince Congress that health risks to residents should not be a reason to deny a tower. That tells you where their priorities are. The Washington Post reports that the telecommunications companies spend a lot of money in Washington and increased their contributions to Congress by 52% to $13 million the year after that act was passed. Sure feels like a quid pro quo. But that doesn't change the truth. Many reputable sites, including the American Cancer Society site mentioned by Verizon, clearly states that there is more research and study needed to understand if there are long-term health effects. The American Academy of Pediatrics notes an increase in children's cancers for those living near the towers. Americans currently live with one of the highest allowed radiation levels in the developed world, and the FCC is currently reviewing these radiation rules as they are deemed antiquated. Because the Planning Board and Selectmen were not comfortable with national studies, we didn't include a separate slide on international studies from companies like the German study showing cancer rates more than tripled among people living within 1,300 feet, or the Israeli study that found the risk of cancer quadrupled among people living within 1,100 feet of a cell phone transmitter, with 7 of 8 cancer victims being women. We can supply those links if anyone is interested. But we did get local expert commentary. Dr. David Carpenter, MD, and Dean of the University of Albany School of Public Health provided this letter. In it, he says cell towers risk several different and serious diseases for people who live nearby, including cancers, altered hormones, which could affect both cancer and infertility, and electrohypersensitivity, which often affects people, including children, in the form of chronic headaches and fatigue. He clearly states that cell towers should not be built near homes where residents are there for a prolonged period of time. Even Verizon makes the radiation danger plain as day. It's also worth noting that Pittsfield residents who had an unwelcome cell tower installed in their neighborhood a few years ago are already fighting to have it removed, claiming that they are sicker than they were before the tower was erected. So even though we can't use health risks as a direct legal reason to deny a tower, this does tie back to the impact on the home values and buyer pool risk. It is the perception of health issues with data that is easily accessible by any interested buyer that is the problem. Also, any buyer can go to websites to see where the nearest tower is as they look to purchase a new home. We are also challenging part of the Verizon proposal. I'm going to turn this over to Dave from Patriots Way, as he has an engineering background. Dave, please go on unmute.
Hi, Corey. Thank you. Also, thank you to Mike and the planning board and the Verizon team. I would like to address the setback issue. There's a lot of numbers to discuss here, so I'm going to read off a cheat sheet. Let's go. We believe that it is clearly evident that the Verizon application to the Town of Southwick Planning Board for a special permit to install a wireless cell tower at 13 Liberty Lane does not meet the setback requirements under Section 185-23.1F of the town bylaws, and therefore the planning board must deny their applications. Referencing the Verizon applications to the Federal Aviation Administration, file number 2018-ANE-5503-OE, the total tower height is submitted at 124 feet. Referencing the Verizon application to the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, file number 2020-BAF-A0124-27, the total tower height is submitted at 124 feet. Referencing the Verizon application for a special permit to the Town of Southwick Planning Board, elevation and antenna plan sheet A2, the total tower height is submitted at 124 feet. At a total tower height of 124 feet, the setback radius is 434 feet, and not, and I emphasize, not the 420 feet as submitted by Verizon to the Town of Southwick Planning Board in document site plan sheet C-3. At 434 feet, the minimum setback requirement to abutters is not satisfied as required by Section 185-23.1F of the town bylaw. Therefore, to repeat, the Town of Southwick Planning Board must deny the Verizon application for a special permit to install a wireless communication tower at 13 Liberty Lane. Finally, and in closing, it is our interpretation of Section 6409A of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012 that Verizon would have the undeniable right in the future to increase the total tower height by approximately 30 feet, bringing the total tower height to 154 feet. The Town Planning Board would be forced to approve such a request. Therefore, the minimum setback radius must be based on the maximum tower height of 154 feet or a setback of 539 feet. At a 539-foot setback radius or anything appreciably above the 420 feet, this parcel of land cannot meet the setback requirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. We have some other challenges. We were challenging the deforestation as unreasonable. Apparently Verizon thinks so too by what we heard tonight, because this would severely impact the back or side vistas of the homes on the corner of Liberty Lane and Mockingbird Lane. We would also like to point out that the balloon test, which was done without notifying the neighborhood, is irrelevant because it does not represent the actual tower structure. It is our understanding that the FEC also requires a butter notification of a balloon test with a certified letter and signs put up at key intersections notifying the rest of the neighborhood of the test. More on that in a minute. We also do not feel that Verizon has participated in full good faith. The balloon test pictures were taken at strategic angles that were almost laughable. Questions are often answered with as minimal information as possible, and only when challenged or probed do more details emerge or suddenly changed, as tonight's deforestation was. We are not experts in reading some of these documents. We should not have to get lucky in asking the right questions. Verizon just made a boilerplate proposal. They don't care about the residents of this neighborhood. The document even references complying with the state of Connecticut. We do not believe that Verizon is entitled to perfect coverage but by the looks of the coverage map they market on their own website, this area looks like it has more than adequate coverage. We would remind the planning board of their obligations to the town's residents in that they are responsible for overseeing land use within the town to ensure the residents live in a safe and healthy environment. We are asking the planning board, with the help of the selectmen, to decline Verizon's requests on the grounds of sections 3 and 4 of the planning board bylaws. When considering an application for a special permit for a wireless communications facility under this section, the planning board shall consider whether and to what extent there is a negative impact from the proximity of the facility to residential dwellings and the impact of the facility on the residences. We submit that the impact on our home values, our safety, and our way of life clearly meets this requirement. The planning board shall also consider whether and to what extent there is negative impact of the proposed facility on scenic vistas and other natural features in the landscape. We submit that the tower itself and the severe deforestation, especially to those in parts of Patriots Way, Deer Run, Lexington Circle, and the intersection of Liberty, Mockingbird, and Partridge are affected. Even the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C. calls cell towers a blight on the landscape and instructs appraisers to note and comment on the marketability resulting from the proximity to such site hazards and nuisances. You will definitely be able to see the tower and the road from many homes, and this ruins the scenic vista for residents. We expect the standards of a reasonable person be applied here. It is unlikely a reasonable person would expect to find a commercial industrial structure like a cell phone tower embedded in a neighborhood of $500,000 homes. Standards of a reasonable person seeking a specific quality of life could expect no interference of a cell phone tower, whether it's visual, a reduction in their property values, or a dangerous radioactive compound in their own backyard. And you will be able to see the tower. These recent drone pictures were taken with the drone set at 124 feet above the ground, the height submitted to the FAA for the tower. And you can see that the top of the tower is easily above the tree line from every street. And the leaves are still on the trees here, and there's no deforestation. So instead of our beautiful vista, we would have this. We asked the planning board to consider other sites. When the town bylaws were changed for telecommunications in 2001, most Lexington Circle and newer Deer Run homes were not built, and the Liberty Lane homes were only finished in the second half of that year. Specifically, whatever it takes to grant a single waiver addendum of the overlay bylaws to allow for the tower on Mr. LaQuarrie's land as a shorter-term solution until the bylaws and overlay can be completely overhauled to reflect all new neighborhoods. Help us find a better solution. Unlike the residents of this neighborhood, Mr. LaQuarrie wants the tower and his property is closer to the typical type of safer location for a tower and is better suited for this purpose versus embedding it in our neighborhood. It is a win for all. We also ask that the town consider any possible other sites. Instead of doing the easy thing to quickly rule something out, look at what it takes to rule something in. As I often tell teams I manage at work, if something is really important, you don't find the easy 10 reasons why it can't be done. You find the one reason that it can be done. There's too much at stake here. And it's not too late. The lease, as we interpret it, states the payment begins at commencement of the equipment installation, and that cannot commence if the planning board rejects the proposal. But while we're 100% in opposition to the tower, we want to reiterate, we are not against cell phone towers. We are against cell phone towers in neighborhoods. In fact, other US towns, including in Massachusetts, are passing ordinances to make it harder for towers to be near homes and schools. But we're not done fighting. We will send this information to local media. We will consult with legal counsel. We have already identified 2 attorneys that we've contacted to discuss representing us either on our own or joining the Agawam residents or the Pittsfield residents. By the way, Agawam town officials took the time to notify their abutters before signing the lease and are going through the discussion process now. We will also actively campaign against any elected official who approves this tower in this location. Mr. Chairman, please note these are not threats. We provide this information in the spirit of transparency and to demonstrate our commitment. People are already talking whether they should move now to preserve their home equity and keep their families safe. There are many other things we would prefer to be doing with our time, and the level of anxiety that this has created in the middle of a pandemic has not been welcome or fair, and neither is the tower. Please don't make us choose between our health and our homes. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. On behalf of my neighbors, we appreciate the time. I yield back.
Thank you, Corey. I think it's probably makes the most sense to me. I know that I believe that Amy Stack also wanted to make a presentation.
This cell tower lady is insane.
Celeste, please. Let's. So, Amy, did you also want to make a presentation, or was it part of the same thing?
It was part of the same thing Corey's representing. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Thanks.
I guess let's first go to the board to see if they have any questions that can be put to, Corey or the others who were part of the presentation, and then we can kind of go forward from there. So do any board members have any questions or comments about what was presented?
Yeah, I had a question on the speed limit on that road, Liberty Lane. Apparently, there's no speed limit sign at this time, but it seems to me there's a minimum speed limit in residential areas. I don't know if Chief Bishop could speak to that. I believe the applicant used 25 miles an hour instead of 45, which seems to be reasonable now. 25, knowing that street is seems to be a reasonable speed.
Okay. Anything else, Marcus?
No, that was the only thing, because that does significantly reduce the amount of vegetation that will be removed.
Okay. Dick, did you have something? Dick, we can't hear you.
I'm okay for now. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm okay for now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yep. Thank you. Any other board members? Okay. Attorney Fenton, did you want to address anything that was said, or any member of your team on behalf of Verizon?
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, but that was very extensive. That's the first time we're seeing a lot of that information. Much of it was misleading and inaccurate, although not all of it. And we'd like an opportunity to respond in full.
And that's fine. So the one thing I would ask, because it did come up last time, and I don't know, I don't remember seeing it in any supplemental materials, is the impact of Section 6409A of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creations Act of 2012. I haven't spent the time on it, but just from my quick look at it, it does seem to suggest that it sort of overrides any local setback requirements or anything like that, and allows for whatever it is, a 10% increase that's not considered to be substantial. I think something like that. So I don't know what that translates into as far as numbers, but if it is 10%, it's obviously, it's 12 feet, but I mean, I don't know, I can't remember the details of the statute, but it does override any local control once something is in place. So I guess I'm curious if now, and I certainly, can appreciate the need to sort of come back with something more, but do you have an opinion right now as to how that plays out in this process?
Yes. So at the last meeting, this issue was addressed, and we took a closer look at 6409. And I can state to the board that there could be no increases in the tower height without needing to appear back before the board and make the appropriate submissions. That could include, but not be limited to, a new special permit filing or an amended special permit filing. Beyond that, Mr. Chair, I'm not in a position to provide a legal opinion on a hypothetical tower increase that is not a part of our application.
But let me just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. And again, I deferring to, feel free to defer and say you need to address it. But my memory from looking at it is that the local entity is allowed, may require a submission to them to make the modification. But the only thing that the local entity is allowed to do is to assure that have assurances that it complies with that particular section of the act. It's not a question of, well, this is going to not meet the setbacks locally. All we'd be looking at, say you built a 120-foot tower and you come back and you want, to kick it up another 10%. All we can look at is whether you have complied with 6409A. And I don't think we can look at our setbacks or anything locally. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know what you're saying to be false. I'm not in a position to provide legal advice to the town on a hypothetical tower increase that we're not proposing. Our proposal is for the 120-foot tower, and any subsequent increases, which may or may not be proposed in the future, we have absolutely no plans for that at this time. That question should be directed to town council.
No, and that's fair. That is fair. I just wanted to get your position on it so we can turn to town council, because I do think that there is an issue as to if you have an automatic ability to extend without any local regulation, other than just making sure that, it complies with that act. I'm not entirely certain that you don't factor that into this for the setbacks, but because you'd automatically be entitled to it. But I will, that's our town council issue and not your issue, but I did want your position on it. Okay. I have just a couple of questions that came to mind with those two presentations tonight. I just wanted to.
I had a question for Jay.
Go ahead, Jessica.
My question was in regards to the RF search areas. You gave us quite some detailed maps regarding the proposed 700 megahertz coverage if the tower was placed at the Lexington Circle property or Liberty Lane, however you want to refer to it. Have you, in your statements in saying that you eliminated the LaQuarrie property as it wouldn't meet the RF coverage needs, do you have that map to share with us to show us that it would not in fact meet the RF coverage needs of that we are currently looking to improve upon with this proposal? If that made any sense.
Hold on.
I apologize. I was double muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry for that. Yep, I understand your question. It certainly made sense. Thank you for it. I don't have that map available at this time. Should the meeting be continued this night and the board would like to see that map, that's something that Verizon would be happy to prepare. I will mention that in addition to the LaQuarrie property, as we're all referring to it, not being within Verizon's radio frequency search area, the parcel is also not in the wireless telecommunications overlay district. But having said that, if it would benefit the board to kind of walk through that visually as well, Verizon would be happy to provide that information.
Great, yeah, because I think for most of us here, when we're talking about other properties being outside of the overlay district, I don't think in the grand scheme of things that's as big as a concern. If we need to, moving forward, alter that. But it certainly is concerning to me that we have this long list of properties where it just says not in the district and also doesn't meet the RF search area requirements. And I have a hard time believing that those two particular properties, the LaCorey property and this one being presented, don't have a similar RF search reach, and that they wouldn't in fact solve the problems that you've presented. Because I do also want to say, Mr. Latore, I appreciate all the amendments and that you've been very forthcoming with the information about the RF search area, trying to explain this stuff to people who aren't necessarily technologically adept to it. So I appreciate that, but it does seem like here we're just taking your word that these properties don't meet this need. And you're asking us to make this decision based upon your need to fix these coverage gaps. I want to see that this potential spot wouldn't cover that need. And I understand, and I'm sure Mr. Fenton might want to jump in and say that we didn't consider it because it's not in our district. But if you're looking at this proposal, understanding that there's a lot of factors coming in, I think we've now moved on to the point where that, I don't want to call it an excuse, but answer, we're going to have to start moving past that. So I would like to see that information, especially on the LaCorey property, as we have residents here who are saying they don't want it here. And we have another resident who's saying, yes, I do. And he would potentially benefit from it. And Verizon might not have to deal with hundreds of residences fighting them on this particular issue. So that would be supplemental material that I would greatly like to see.
And Verizon would be happy to provide that.
Thank you.
Mr. Latore, if I could just, I want to try to understand, because at least in one of the documents I read, which I think was, and we're going to have to, I guess, start to refer to versions here, but I think it was the engineering necessity case that was submitted last, prior to last meeting. And I haven't looked at the new one to see if it's in there, but I think Rising Corner Road was mentioned in there, at least as part of the desired coverage area. And certainly Mr. LaCorey's property is up from Rising Corner Road. So I guess I'm curious as to where that, RF search area is being defined, if, it is certainly within the area that coverage is sought to be, increased or supplemented.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to a document specifically referencing Rising Corner Road, I don't believe I've provided any testimony that specifically references that road. Again, that being said, I understand that there's been multiple versions of the document as we attempt to, obtain feedback and provide, additional supplemental information to the board. So if the meeting is continued tonight and that information is shared, even if it doesn't say Rising Corner Road, but you're just looking to get some additional clarification, we'd be happy, to continue to provide as much, clarification as we can. What I would just say is to refer you more generally to the request that you had from the last meeting, which was to prepare documentation, Verizon prepare documentation to help educate the board a little bit more about the search area ring process. I've put together documentation that tries to, in a to use Ms. Thornton's language, in a way that is easier for those that are not in the industry to understand what we're trying to accomplish here with our proposal to eliminate a coverage gap and to eliminate insufficient service. We have a lot of considerations that we have to take into account. If we just for a second move away from the discussion of overlay districts and setbacks and tower height and appurtenances and some of those other legal factors, and we just talk about what goes into the positioning of a wireless communications facility, there are a lot of factors that are noted in this document for your reference. We have to look at not only where our existing facilities are, where our coverage, let me start over, excuse me. Not only do we have to look at where our coverage gap is, where our demand is, where our insufficient service areas are, we need to do that within the context of where our existing facilities are. As I mentioned before and briefly, we can't build facilities, if you will, right on top of each other. And I don't mean that in the literal sense, but the closer facilities are built to one another, their inability to meet a particular coverage gap, if not placed properly, increases. Their amount of overlap increases, which results in greater areas where competing radio frequency resources can cause interference. And so, as I kind of document in this this Word document, we really carefully look at a geographical area to narrow it down within the confines of geography, within the confines of existing facilities, within the confines of coverage gaps, and a whole host of other issues to identify a rough geographical area where we can start to look. And then we get into all of the other things that Councilor Fenton and others in Verizon's panel have presented in terms of the additional due diligence that has to be performed before we can come before the board.
So, Mr. Latore, if I could, I'm just going to share a screen here. And that's what I'm referring to when I was talking about Rising Corner Road. And that's at least sort of in my mind when I read that first came in on, and I think Forest is supposed to be Foster Road. But when I read this came in, I think in the first supplement, this at least helped clarify in my mind the sort of bounds of what you were trying to do and what you're trying to cover. So, when I look at Mr. Latore's property, at least, it's certainly above Rising Corner Road on South Long Yard, and would seem like it would, potentially be within the search area of what you're looking for. So I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding the search area, the RF search area. That's always been the problem that I've been having throughout this. So if you could offer anything, at least specifically dealing with Mr. LaCourt's property, that'd be great.
Yep. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies to the board and the public for that oversight on my account. A couple of things. Yes, I meant to write Foster Road there, not Forest Road. So my apologies for that to all on the meeting tonight. In this second paragraph of the project need overview, I do reference Rising Corner Road. And again, I apologize for that as well. I do not mean to create any confusion for anyone here. Within that paragraph, I'm not attempting to document the search area in which Verizon is looking for a proposed facility. I'm just documenting, given that we have the proposed facility before the board, where the facility, should it be built, will provide enhancements in coverage, particularly because we like to provide a narrative so that people could understand in a broad sense some of the key landmarks, if you will, where the proposed facility will enhance service in and around the community. The search area certainly benefits from, or I should say, the area closest to the proposed facility, which is located within the search area, obviously benefits the most from the proposed facility because the signal strength and areas of reliable service are most robust as you move closer to the facility. But certainly, as we showed in the updated maps tonight, the areas outside of the search area, areas further away from the facility will also benefit. And that's what I was looking to highlight here. So whether there are additional areas that are benefiting because they're moving from areas of unreliable coverage to reliable coverage, or there are areas that are moving from not having reliable indoor service to having indoor service, or areas where maybe they have reliable service, but we just don't have the capacity to meet the demand, and now because of this facility, we'll be able to better meet that demand. That's really what I was trying to describe in this paragraph. And then just referring back to that search area ring, if you look at paragraph 4 of the 5-paragraph document I prepared, I would refer to that because what I attempt to do is to give you, the rough boundaries of the search area where we looked at. So, we were looking at Foster Road to the east, South Long Yard Road to the south, Feeding Hills Road to the north, and then the western boundary, if you drew a line from South Long Yard Road starting at LaCourie Drive and went roughly due north to where Gargan Terrace meets Feeding Hills Road, Route 57, that gives you, a good idea of where I felt this facility needed to be placed in order to meet a lot of the things that we've already talked about tonight: eliminating the coverage gap, enhancing service, providing necessary separation between facilities to ensure that the individual facilities continue to be effective, but allowing for a little bit of overlap to make sure that handoffs between the facilities are reliable, and a host of the other considerations that we've looked at thus far.
Okay, thank you. So let me just ask 2 questions. One is sort of, I guess, a little bit related to that, which is, we've gone over the capacity and coverage and terminology that's been used, and I'm just trying to conceptualize it. Does Verizon, and not Verizon specifically, but any cell phone provider, basically get the right to have an unlimited customer base? I mean, is that sort of how we have to think about it, where if they bring on more customers and they cause insufficiency, they can put in more towers to get more customers? Or is there some kind of limit there? And perhaps that's not a question directed toward you. I just wanted to raise it and allow whoever felt the need to answer it to answer it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to sidestep your question, but I certainly don't know that I could give an answer that really speaks to what you're asking. I can only just refer without, repeating myself, that, we have an identified need in the area. We've provided documentation that speaks to that need. We've documented that wireless services and the demand for them continues to grow, that there's a need to continue to meet the need of customers in and around this part of Southwick. And that, you know, we feel we have a proposal before you that will meet our network needs and is also in harmony with the bylaws that the town puts forth. Attorney Fenton, I don't know if you would like to maybe speak to that a little bit more.
I think that was very well said, Jay.
The only other question I have before I turn it over to public comment, and I guess I'd direct right now, if anybody has comments or questions, just pop your name in, or, you know, pop something into the chat, and I'll just kind of go in order when I turn to the public comment and questions. You know, the one, and I've mentioned this before, and the one that sticks out to me most prominently is the property between the school and, you know, heading over toward the water station over by Craig's Tea House down off of 57. You know, that, and let me just grab the parcel number so that we're talking about the same thing, which is, it's referred to as off Feeding Hills Road. It's 74-5 is the assessor's number. It's on the first page of the statement regarding alternative facilities. You know, that to me, when I look at that, seems to be within your RF search area. You know, as I've sat down on GIS and looked at the topography of both that and the property off of Liberty, I don't see much difference. I mean, I see, I think at a minimum, a line of, I think 206. I can't remember what it is. I don't have it right here, but they were pretty equivalent, I thought, in topography. Maybe you needed a slightly bigger tower depending on where you put it on the property down by 57. But, you know, if you're talking about a 120-foot tower now, you do have some room to add on if necessary down there. And I don't know what the trees look like down there, so I don't know what, you know, how noticeable it would be. But just talking about theoretically, I think you could put it down there. It's within the wireless district. It really has, you know, some proximity to two smaller neighborhoods, I believe. You know, mostly Gargan Terrace, arguably Buckingham Drive, which is much farther up Feeding Hills Road. But, you know, it's certainly not the density that you would have here. It's got access to a good portion of it already with the road going to the water station, which could be extended so you can minimize the amount of deforestation that's there. It's town owned, so you would have the ability to deal with a town versus, you know, a private property owner, which could be potentially more difficult. And you've already had some, you know, success and positive negotiations with the town of Southwick. So I would like to hear what exactly it is. I mean, you write existing site constraints, including wetlands and parcel ground elevation. And when I put the wetlands on there, I see some in the back, but other than that, I don't see much in the way of wetlands. And, you know, like I said, I thought the ground elevation was pretty similar. But, you know, I'd like to hear what your explanation is for why that would not work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'd be happy to provide that analysis for you. And I'm going to turn it over to Jay Latore to do that. Before I do, though, I just want to reiterate to the board that Verizon and its consultants have evaluated each and every parcel in the overlay district in this vicinity of town. and have provided testimony and evidence as to why each and every one of those parcels are not feasible for Verizon's coverage needs and the proposed tower. And this site in particular, though, Mr. Chairman, as you highlighted, required some additional due diligence on our part because of a lot of the factors that you articulated, which would have otherwise made it an attractive parcel. So we have prepared some additional constraints maps to highlight for you some of the issues that you just raised about topography, the wetlands. I believe it's Great Brook that runs through that parcel, lot 5, as well as the setbacks that would be triggered by a tower if we were to propose one in that area. So, and I understand there's also some RF issues. So Jay, I'll turn it over to you to present in detail about this site. But Mr. Chair, the purpose of that introduction was just to let everybody know that we have done an exhaustive search of the overlay parcels in this area of town, and we did additional scrutiny and due diligence on this parcel because of the otherwise attractive variables that you described. So Jay, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, and we can go through the coverage maps and the constraints map.
Sure. Thank you, Attorney Fenton. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to attempt to share my screen again. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I think you have to stop sharing, if you may, sir, before I share. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Mr. Chairman, if you could just let me know if you can see my screen again, sir.
I can.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So again, I'm just going to step through a couple of maps here just to put together our due diligence on the parcel in question, which is parcel, make sure I get it right, parcel lot 5, I'll call it. And so again, I just wanted to start with showing the existing coverage within the town of Southwick that we focused in on here. You can see our proposed facility here, and the areas in which we've identified a coverage gap that we're hoping to improve with the proposed facility. You can also see the coverage from the other existing facilities within the town or outside of the town that are still providing that robust, reliable coverage in green, which is our indoor coverage layer to the town of Southwick. And I want to note in particular the fact that outside of a small area here, starting at this intersection and moving into Feeding Hills Road, that most of the coverage in Southwick, or I should say, most of the area above Route 57 in Southwick has, at the very least, reliable indoor service, and at worst, reliable in-car coverage. So we're doing pretty well above Route 57 with our 2 existing facilities. We have issues to the southeast portion of town, which is why we're looking at the proposed facility that's before the board. A couple of maps that I want to show you. I'm going to zoom in here just so it's a little bit easier to see. So as Attorney Fenton mentioned, we did want to do some due diligence, some further due diligence on this parcel because, as you're aware, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, that there are a number of parcels that are in the overlay district. Some of them are fairly small and really could not meet a setback requirement, but we wanted to look at this one because this parcel is bigger. The first thing you see here on the map is, I want to just mention it's the same coverage layer. So green is indoors, yellow is in-car, this gray is outdoors, and then anything else, basically the areas where this site isn't providing any meaningful, reliable service. So you can see here, I've modeled that proposed facility. I'm just calling it Parcel 5. And then here's our proposed facility off Foster Road, just to provide reference. So I believe it's more than I'd say a quarter mile northwest of the proposed facility before you, which is, you see it here with the sectors. And again, just to reference, Mr. Chairman, same concept, that alpha, beta, gamma sector going northeast, southeast, and almost west. So a couple of things that come out here when you take a look at this. The first thing you'll notice, and I'll come back to the other coverage map briefly, is that when you try to look at a facility at this location, you see that there are areas along Foster Road, South Longyard Road in particular, where with a proposed facility at Parcel 5, we lose that necessary indoor service for the residences and homes along these roads, as well as other parts of the community that the proposed facility, if I go back to my map, does a much better job of covering. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but I'll get to that in a minute. The other thing you notice, and I'll reference back those other maps, is not surprisingly, because this facility is further northwest, it does, in theory, provide a better job of providing more robust service to areas north of Route 57. Now, in a given, if we took this alone and we looked at it, we say, oh, well, that's a good thing. The problem is, as I alluded to when we were talking about the search area, and how it gets defined not only by where our coverage gap is, but also where our existing services is, we're already fairly robust along Route 57 north of it. And that's because we have two facilities in relative close proximity to Route 57 that are providing service. And the facility on top of Croghan Mountain, although further away, is much substantially taller in both height and in ground elevation, which allows it to have a bigger footprint. So in this particular instance, coming back to this coverage plot, having this additional robust coverage north of 57, for the most part, is not a benefit. It's actually more of a detriment, because we are just providing robust service in areas, for the most part, where we already have robust service. In a wireless communications network, as I mentioned, a little bit of overlap is necessary to make sure those handoffs from site A to site B occur seamlessly. A lot of overlap just creates a lot of interference. It's a lot of instances where the phone is, we use in my industry in a simple term, ping-ponging between site A and site B, because it sees too many facilities with similar coverage strength. And that end result there is a degradation in service in both voice and data. Now, that being said, from the radio frequency perspective, we still wanted to look at the parcel, because we thought, like you said, Mr. Chairman, that these parcels seem to have some additional merit in that they were within the RF search ring and they are in the overlay district. And so my colleague, Dean Gustafson from All Points Technology, who's also on the call, put together the attached constraints map. I'll walk you through it, and then if there are questions, I'll be happy to speak about it. So just to provide reference, this is Lexington Circle down here. You can see the topographical features of this map, and just a couple things I want to point out to you. You can see Southwick High School here. This is Route 57. And so what we've done is we've actually looked at two parcels, both Lot 5 and Lot 54, because they are larger parcels, and they are also in the overlay district. And so we thought they were both merited in terms of review. What we've done here, and what you'll see here, and I'll zoom in a little bit here, is we've picked a facility. We put an X on the map, based on our assessment of a reasonable location to try and put a wireless telecommunications facility. And it's a little hard to see on the map here because of the shading in here, but it is intended to follow that existing access road that comes off of Feeding Hills Road. I think there's some sort of a water building here. And then we just started to move this facility to try and capture as much elevation as possible. Because as we have provided in our zoning drawings, the elevation at our proposed facility off Foster Road is at 254 feet in elevation. We're a little bit more on a plateau. As you move northwest away from Lexington Circle, the elevation drops dramatically as you pass by Great Brook, and then it starts to increase as you move a little further northwest. So the proposed location that we have here as an elevation of 210 feet, and so it's roughly 44 feet lower in elevation. Well, then you start to look at a couple of different factors, which I'll talk about here. The first is looking at the site itself and what the potential height of the tower could be. Could we overcome some of that loss in elevation based on an increase in tower height? The bylaws, according to the town, are that the maximum height of a proposed telecommunications facility are 150 feet, including any appurtenances attached to that tower. So for that purposes, we assume the tower of 150 feet in this location.
Mr. Latore, can I stop you for 1 minute?
Yes,
I apologize
Go right
for
ahead.
interrupting. I just want to,
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
before you get too far, I just want to understand where you're getting the numbers from, because as I look, where you're getting have you actually gone out and measured the site, the site that you propose, and have you gone out and measured that proposed alternative site?
Okay, so I'll answer those two questions, and then I'm going to defer to Mr. Gustafson to speak a little bit more about this map. So first, the question about the off Foster Road facility that is before you tonight. Yes, that facility has been surveyed, and those elevations and the elevation, ground elevation of the proposed facility is depicted in the zoning drawings that were included in the application. In the map that I'm sharing with you here, this has not been surveyed, but I'll defer to Mr. Gustafson if you could just briefly talk about the elevation lines that you have here and how they're depicted on the map.
Sure, Jay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members, and public. My name's Dean Gustafson. I'm a senior wetland scientist with All Points Technology, working on behalf of Verizon Wireless. The map that you see before you, the topography is publicly available from MassGIS website, and it's the same elevation and topographic data that's available on the town's GIS website.
Great. Thank you, Dean. Mr. Chairman, any additional questions before I continue? I'll just continue if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman. So,
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Mr. Latore, I was on mute, and I apologize. I just didn't catch that I got put on mute.
Oh, no worries.
So when I look at, and I don't know if your map goes down any further south than that, but when I look at the GIS for Southwick, I don't see 254. And so that's why I asked the question, because that's the first I've heard of that. We might have had it in the documents and I just missed it, but that's the first that I'm at least, hearing of that height. When I look at the GIS, I see, I think 236 as the height there. And so I'm just so you have actually gone out and surveyed 254 at the tower site, but you're using the GIS for the other sites.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. And I'll just refer you, let me just verify the sheet here. This is sheet, let's see, sheet C2. You can see here that the proposed center of towers here, the coordinates are shown here, and the ground elevation of 254 feet is shown here. And that's done doing what's known as a 1A accuracy survey.
And I guess I'm curious as to if that's not shown on Mass GIS as that height, why are we assuming that, the spot over on lot 5 is going to be, what do you have it as, 210, rather than some plateau that's there? Because it seems like the highest number I see in the Liberty Lane parcel is 236, and I could be missing something, but that's the highest one that I've personally seen on the GIS. And you're going up by almost 20 feet. It's not to say that it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's, when you get down into the, more specifics, this is not going to actually capture every single, bump in the land.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Dean Gustafson again from All Points. I'm looking at the town's GIS website right now, and there is a 255 elevation contour that runs through the subject parcel in proximity to the proposed tower location. So I think the data is fairly consistent across the two properties that we're talking about.
Okay, then maybe I'm just missing it, and I'm happy to go back and look at it again. But maybe I just missed it when I looked at it.
Mr. Chair, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
I was going to say, what caused you to pick that particular area of lot 5 versus, I see some plateaus that are there. What is it that caused you to pick one at 210 feet versus one that's at 236 or other?
Sure. Yep, sure. So let me just briefly just kind of go over to the key here, or legend, just so we can clarify a couple of things here. So as we've talked about, there's a lot of different site characteristics that we need to look at in order to make a determination on whether or not a parcel has a location that would be that could appropriately site a telecommunications facility. We have to look at the wetlands and watercourse buffer area. Not surprisingly, with Great Brook, running through not only parcel 5 but also lot 54, there are a lot of areas that are either depicted as wetlands, according to Mass DEP, or would be subject to development restrictions within the 200-foot riverfront area. The watercourse is shown as well, and so in particular, those wetlands and riverfront boundaries encompass almost the entirety of lot 54 and the south, I'll call it the southeast portion of lot number 5. As you move further northwest, you start to get outside of those areas. The location that we picked was about trying to find a what I'll call an analysis location that looked at all of the competing interests here. So yes, Mr. Chairman, if we say, for example, move the proposed alternative further northwest, there are areas in elevation that are higher, and one might say, well, now you're making up more of that ground. You might not need as large of a tower to try and simulate coverage that was similar to the proposed facility. On the alternative point of view, as you move further northwest, you're dealing with proposed facility that is getting closer and closer to our existing facilities. And now you're dealing with more of that overlap, which we've already testified is detrimental to wireless communications networks. It's pushing us further away from where our coverage gap is, and making it less likely that we would be able to meet our wireless design objectives. In particular, whether you if you had it at this location or whether you moved it further to the northwest, based on our analysis, it's clear that we're dealing with lower elevation. And as such, we have to attempt to overcome that elevation by increasing the tower height. In our proposed alternative here that we depicted visually, we're assuming the max possible tower height to try and overcome that issue of loss of terrain, ground elevation, as much as possible. And what we found in our analysis is that when you get into a tower height of 150 feet and you are still bound by the bylaws of the town, in particular that note that you have a 3.5 tower setback from the tower location to any residential lot, and dealing with these parcels that are generally encumbered on all sides by residential lots, our analysis showed, and that's what this shows in pink, is that if you wanted to build a tower at the maximum allowable height of 150 feet, you're not able to meet the setback anywhere on this parcel. If you move the if you move the proposed alternative site perhaps further to the northwest, so that hypothetically you could have a slightly shorter tower, and I might say I'm not sure that that even is a hypothetical, because we're already dealing with this location a reduction of 44 feet in elevation. So even with a proposal that we have here at 150 feet, we're still short in terms of overall height at that proposed location. And if we attempted to move it to a different location that maybe we had a different ground elevation, gain some of that, we still got to get back, let's say upwards of 15 just before we can get close to even. And at that point, as you move further to the northwest and you deal with the narrowing of the parcel, you reach the conclusion that there isn't a location on here that's going to be able to meet those setbacks. And it emphasizes what makes the proposal before you feasible, and how the other lots that may be within the overlay district, but and maybe in the wireless search area, but are not feasible because of the tower setback requirements, as well as in portions of this parcel, some of the other site characteristics, including the wetlands, the riverfront areas, the loss of elevation.
Don't you just have to move 75 feet to your west and you're up at 226 or more, and then you're within the numbers for the town bylaw?
Well, I don't want to speak to the 75 feet piece, but I think you're referring to this little area here closer to lot 5. You're still dealing with a ground elevation loss of roughly, I think it would be 28 feet. And so if you moved, over here and you were trying to compensate for that loss of ground elevation, you still have to build a tower approximately 28 feet taller in height to try and compensate for that. You pushing the facility further and closer to other adjacent facilities and further away from the proposed facility, and further away from the coverage gap, and at a tower height of approximately, say, 148 feet, maybe you're shrinking your, what would it be, 2 feet times, you're gaining about 7 feet in terms of the setback distance.
And that's fine, but I just, this to me seems to be, you know, the biggest issue you face, which is that, I mean, if you have a tower that's put here, it's certainly not as residentially dense as where you want it. You can be within the numbers that are in the bylaw. And, you know, I think even if you felt you needed to cover something on Foster Road, I'm not sure, based on what you've submitted so far, that, as you described, those small cells wouldn't work on Foster Road to sort of supplement over there. I don't see that as, to me, that seems like a very viable alternative. And I'm simply not there that that's not a viable alternative. But let's get into more public comments, because I think we're.
Mr. Chair, if I may, if it's okay to respond to just one part of what you said.
Sure.
Just the statement that there are locations on Lot 5 which would allow us to comply with the bylaw, that is not our testimony. Our testimony is that there are no locations on Lot 5 that will allow us to comply with the setbacks of the bylaw.
Well, if you're at 226 and you add 28 feet to the 120-foot tower, then you're at 148, right? I mean, that's inside the numbers. I could be wrong, but I think that's what Mr. LaTorre just said. So
we would be inside the numbers with respect to height, but we would then fall outside the numbers when you multiply that height by 3.5 times the tower height from each property line. And that is the issue with the red shading that you see throughout this constraints map, because each and every one of these parcels that surround Lot 5 are residentially zoned, and the bylaw requires us to be 3.5 times the tower height from all residential lots.
Okay, and we can certainly look at that. You know, you can't tell on here because there is no. We can't put the surrounding on it. Okay, so let me go to the comments here and see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think the first one I see here is Sarah Hedges, I believe.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have a lot to say, but I'm going to focus on one comment. When I joined this meeting at 7:15 today, actually 7, and at 7:15, I heard some discussion about Green East, and I heard about open space, and I heard about how open space indirectly benefits the town and the development. And I heard Marcus and Dave from the board comment in support of that. So I guess I'm just a little bit confused about those comments about open space being beneficial to the town and our open space being looked at for a giant tower. So that was my comment. I guess I'm just confused about a meeting agenda item that talks about the benefits of open space, and then our open space is turning into the best spot for a tower. So Dave or Marcus, if you want to comment, I'd love to hear it, but I'm a bit confused.
So I guess, Sarah, I'd just respond, you know, I don't, the idea that they may function similarly, I think is right. And I'm not going to disagree with that, but this is not technically open space, right? There's open space is what's dedicated by a developer when submitting a development to, you know, with flexible residential development, they put some, you know, 40% of it as open space, and that's, you know, they have to leave as open space. That's what we're talking about when we talked about open space. This was simply town-owned land. It's been town-owned land for, you know, many, many years. So they are functionally different, I think, a little bit But I do understand your point, you know, that these are what has effectively been open space because people have been using it for some, you know, 50 plus years.
That's correct, Mike. The Greens East, that is private land. It is open space, but it's privately owned. This property off of Liberty Lane was purchased by the town, so it's public land and it's under the purview of the town.
I get that. I just think that it's a benefit to the town, just like it is to the residents of that other community to have open space for the purposes of their houses and property value and recreation. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Ally Robb, I see, wants to make a comment.
Oops. Yeah. Hi, how are you? Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for just giving me this opportunity. I live on Deer Run. The access road will be right behind my house where I am. And my only comment is in regards to public safety. It was brought up in the presentation. And I just would like to kind of reiterate my concern with that. Growing up in Agawam, I know one of the references was to Robinson State Park. And that is definitely a much bigger area. And I would just like to know, maybe from the town or even from any of our public safety that are here today, once that road goes in, what is going to be done to make sure that it isn't kind of open where people are going to be have free access to that to hang out, party, whatever. And I would just like to note that there has been an increase in car break-ins in our neighborhood. Just this past Monday, there were some as well. So this is a legit concern of the residents. And I just feel like this is just kind of a magnet potentially for such activity. So that's my public comment. And that's a concern that I have, knowing this is going to be right in my backyard. So
Okay,
thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
I see Mary Martin wishes to have a public comment.
Yeah, this is Patrick, Mary's husband. So I'm just wondering, we still this tower height, and I'm not trying to drive this into the ground or not, but we're talking 124 feet. At 124 feet, as Dave Giaggio had explained, the setback isn't enough. The 420-foot setback is not enough. Do the math. And I'm not sure why we're just ignoring that fact, because we're hearing about these other locations where it doesn't fit. Well, it doesn't fit here in a residential neighborhood.
So I guess my feeling, and I could be wrong, and certainly Verizon can offer and step in here, but my memory is that they have effectively said that if there is any kind of issue with the height going up to 124 feet, that they would simply lower it to allow them to be where they need it to be. And I could be wrong on that, but that was my memory. And, you know, if we're talking a handful of feet, I didn't think they had an issue with that. And ultimately they were going to stay within whatever the setbacks needed to be, whether we're talking about 116-foot tower or 120-foot tower. But that was my memory. And I simply haven't focused on it, but
Hey, Mike, I'm sorry. I've been biting my tongue on this.
Well, no, we have to have some sort of order here. And so I apologize, but
I understand that, Mike, but you have to answer the question. The question is, they can bring this down to 100 feet.
Dave.
And by 4609,
all right. We're going to have some, we can't just jump in, and I will get to you, Dave. I see you on here. You have a question, we will get to it, but we can't simply do that. Attorney Fenton, am I understanding that correctly, or is there a different response?
No, you have correctly stated Verizon's position. Our tower height is 120 feet. The antennas extend an additional 4 feet on our proposed zoning drawings. If the planning board determines that the antenna height should be included in the definition of tower height, we will agree to reduce the height of our antennas by 4 feet to put them at the 120. Another reason for the board to deliberate and think to consider in that context is if public safety equipment is to co-locate on this tower, by all reference, it was likely that those antennas would extend above the existing tower height. And if you're going to include our antennas in the definition of tower height, that would be a consideration for the board to have down the line. And just for the public safety comment, there will be an access gate preventing non-authorized vehicles from entering the site.
Okay. Dave, you can go ahead with your addressing that issue.
Yeah, I can say that if this tower, if we don't have a clarification on 4609A, Mr. Fenton has sidestepped the question. I think we asked back in the last meeting that that you talk with our town council on the interpretation of 4609A. That hasn't been done, but lowering the height by a couple of feet just to make the setback doesn't mean anything if once that tower is installed by 4609A, they can then increase it by 30 feet. Now, what 4609A says is that they can increase the height of this tower by 20 feet from the top of their highest antenna to the bottom of the next antenna they're going to put up. So that's where I get the formula for a 30 feet extension to this tower. This tower does not fit here. And to what Pat Martin says, this is being dismissed. It's just being kicked down the road. You're not answering the question. You need, as a town, to get with your lawyer or our lawyers and find out what 46.9A really means to this project. Because if it does in fact mean that this tower can be raised by 30 feet, then we have a whole new game that we have to play. So please, at the next meeting, could the town bring in our council and get their opinion on what 46.9A means to set back for this tower? And I don't mean to get I don't mean to be upset about this, but it is frustrating as hell to just sit back here and just listen to talk and nobody answering the questions that we have. Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, and we'll certainly get an answer for you. I mean, I guess the other issue that I see with that is that if you have to take into account 30 feet, wherever they put the tower, they may say you're not letting them put a tower anywhere in town that covers their gap. I mean,
yeah, but Mike, the way I would respond to that is you wrote the rules.
No, I didn't. I don't work for the federal government. I'm not.
Okay. Well, the federal government wrote the rules, and be honest with you, it's probably the best thing that ever happened to us that they lobbied Congress to put this into to put 46.9A in, because it's a loophole for us to kick this tower out of our neighborhood.
Okay. Well, I will. What I will do is I will ask town council to offer an opinion, and we can submit it at the next meeting so that everybody can see it, and we'll put it on the website. As part of a document that's submitted with, for the public hearing.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to see if there was anybody else. Amy Stack, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I did just want to kind of go back to some of the discussions and the maps that were shared earlier about this coverage block and the green area and the red area. And we keep focusing on Southwick as a town when we already have 3 towers in our town, 1 in Suffield and 2 in Agawam. And according to the Mr. Latore, he had indicated that the coverage block was more so located in the southeast portion of Southwick, which would put the ideal tower actually more towards Suffield and address that overlay concern. And I am by no means an expert in this, But I would think that relocating it to another area would make the most sense. My other question is, there were some comments made from the police department regarding wanting to add some extensions to the tower for public safety. And I think that that's great, but it kind of piggybacks on Dave's concern about the height of the tower exceeding the 3.5 times radius. So my suggestion for the town and for Verizon would be, can we put that 8-foot to 20-foot extension on another tower in Southwick and not on this one? So again, I know it's being worked on, but at the next meeting, I would like to see another option, not in Southwick, in Suffield. And is it an option to extend the tower on one of the 3 already in our little town of Southwick? We have 3 towers to address the police's concern.
Mike? Okay, if I may speak, sir?
Yes, and I apologize because I can't. Oh, Chief Bishop, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, ma'am, I would like to address that. The problem being is that prior administrations did not reach out to these cell phone towers when they came into our community to begin with. If we now reach out to another tower that's already in our community, we've got to pay thousands of dollars to have a structural study done to see if we have to pay a lot more money to see if they can handle our antennas. When we start off fresh with a company coming into our town, they know what we need to have to put on their tower. We don't have to pay for that study. It's incorporated into the plans of the tower itself, ma'am.
So, Chief Bishop, there is not any other whip antennas or other equipment on any of the 3 towers in town?
No, sir. We have one on Sodom Mountain. We were able to work on a deal with Chief Rendell's and the Granville Select Board up there, and able to put one on the Sodom Mountain tower because it was a pre-existing thing. We just added onto their antenna itself where it didn't affect the structural makeup of the tower itself. We would like to get on any other, but again, it's the cost factor for us in the police department. If we don't get on fresh like we're trying to do right now on any tower that comes into town now under my control, it's almost uncostly to make it beneficial for us to do at that point in time.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? I don't think when I had gone through it, saw anybody else on here. Any other?
Mike, I have one more question.
Sure, Dave.
If the tower is lowered to 116 feet or 124 feet, whatever Verizon says they will do to accommodate the setback, that means that our public safety cannot put an antenna on top of that tower because it will violate our bylaws. So we can't look at this tower as it being a benefit to our public safety because it doesn't exist, because the law prevents them from putting the tower up.
I think it depends on whether you take into account the antenna as part of the height, but
if I may again,
by total height, and I've looked at other town ordinances on what they mean by height. In your definition of, and I don't have it in front of me, by your definition of total height by any reasonable definition is at ground level to the very top of whatever exists on the top of that tower. So the public safety officers really may want this, but they can't have it because it violates the bylaws.
Mike, if I may, Chief Bishop again.
Yes, Chief.
Yes, sir. And Dave, I do understand what you are saying there also, but all we can do is request. We're not, we'd love to have the top spot at that tower, but it's not feasible to do that. Many of these towers and other law enforcement agencies and fire department have gone down lower on the tower. It's basically, we take what we can get. And if it improves our public safety, we do understand that we may have to have that whip tower put, 20 feet lower on the tower itself.
Yeah, but you will have to locate below the 3 collator positions on that tower, which puts you in the forest, which makes your antenna useless.
We don't know, again, we don't know that yet, Dave. We don't pay for a study to be done until we know the tower is in our community. So
Well,
we
this
may
is
have.
why we're,
Yep.
this is why we're having the discussion, so we understand what we are actually signing up for if we decide to move forward with this tower.
Absolutely, sir. Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
And, hey, Mike, and one other point. Why has Verizon not responded to our comment on setback? I don't understand it. They haven't said they'll lower the tower. It just seems like none of our questions are being answered.
Dave, I think he literally just said that, that they would lower it by 4 feet if they needed to. So I think they have addressed it, but let me just see if there's any other public comments before we turn to a few things we need to.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Before the end here. Any other public comments?
Yeah, this is Gary Julius, and I would say that Corey gave an excellent presentation, and I didn't hear Verizon comment on any of it in terms of health issues, in terms of the setback, in terms of everything. They actually dismissed it and went on to what Verizon needs. I would like to hear their comment on what perhaps they could offer to the residents who pay taxes to the community. So I heard nothing from that.
So I would say that, and I think Attorney Fenton did say this, which is, they saw this presentation for the first time today. I do think it's fair to allow them to, process it and address it, not necessarily on the spot. I think they should have the ability to come back and offer their response.
Okay, no, and that's cool, but like for instance, the safety concerns. I'd like to ask, why does Verizon post on their fences and everything the signs of safety concerns when they stated there is no safety concerns?
This is where I think there is some difficulty, and I get it. I don't want to minimize it, but at the same time, as I've said before, you have to understand the restrictions that are put on local boards as it relates to those types of issues. It's not something that local boards are necessarily allowed to consider if Verizon meets the requirements of the FCC. It's I think pretty straightforward in the Telecommunications Act as to what we are allowed to consider.
But Mike, they have to also have to establish they agree to the bylaws of the town. And that works before they put the tower up. Once they put the tower up, it's theirs and they can raise it to any height they want.
That's a different issue. I'm talking about the health and environmental effects. And I just want to make sure, I've said it at the last couple of meetings, and I do want to make sure, I'm just not putting my hands on the actual statute, but I want to make sure that people understand the sort of constraints that we do have on that. I get it. I mean, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I hope you understand that there is the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which, we do have to follow. So,
But Mr. Chairman,
and
the
Mike,
Dave, 1 minute, please. Dave, 1 minute, please.
Yep.
The Telecommunications Act says that we can't say there's all these studies that say it causes cancer and hormone issues and electro hypersensitivity. So therefore, any sane person would say, why would we want to put it in residence? Your hands are tied there. But if you don't, you can't just connect.
or you're breaking up a little bit. I'm having difficulty.
Sorry, the phone number wouldn't let me in. You can't just say that, we can't say that it's obvious all these studies say that there's cancer issues and other health issues. So therefore, yes, it probably will cause you cancer, but our hands are tied. Because the issue of buyer pool and home values is not a health issue. It's an issue of you're making our properties less attractive, less value. And your obligation as the planning board is to us, not to Verizon. And I really would like to understand what's Verizon's second choice? What can be done that thing that we just had to sit through about lot 5 somewhere over there? What can be done to help make that a better accommodation? What can be done to make Mr. LaQuarrie's property the right choice? Nothing illegal, but think outside the box. You know, if you're in a box, then go to the edges of the box. Don't sit in the middle of the box and say our hands are tied.
So
that's my request.
Okay, so Corey, and I do appreciate the way it was presented, and I do would expect Verizon to address it, because to the extent that perceived health issue. I mean, perceived is probably not the right word, and I'm not trying to
it's not
minimize it, but I'm not sure. Verizon's not going to agree with it, and I think you've seen a lot of things that say it needs to be studied further. So I just don't want to commit to one way or the other because I don't know the answer to it. But whatever the health effects may or may not be, I do appreciate that understanding or that fear or that whatever you want to call it by property owners may impact property values. That's certainly something that needs to be addressed. My comment was simply on the direct impact of environmental effects or health effects, because as I did grab it, I'm looking at this, you can't regulate it on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that they comply with the FCC regulations. So, I do want to make that distinction, but I think the distinction you have made is valid and something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and again, we want to know what Verizon will do for our property values. How will they specifically address that? And all the other concerns that Corey had made in her presentation. So, and not at this meeting, I agree, but maybe the next meeting.
So Gary, let me just point out, and I said it at the beginning, and I don't want it to get missed by anyone. They did submit the other day an appraisal. There is technical issues trying to get that up on the website. And I don't believe it's up yet. So and it's been referenced a little bit tonight, but you will have the opportunity, because it's a pretty lengthy document, to take a look at it between this meeting and the next meeting. So I assume there's going to be, I've looked at it somewhat. There is, some answers to your questions. You may not agree with it, certainly, and you may respond to it, but I think there's going to be some addressing of the issue in that appraisal.
Hey, Mike, this is Jeff. How are you?
Good, Jeff.
Yeah, so obviously we did the same thing in regards to the letters and the appraisals, obviously. I think, I don't remember who that Mr. Fenton said they used for appraisal, but they said the values don't go down. I mean, I find that impossible. I don't know where Mr. Fenton lives, but if I built a cell phone tower, a 120-foot tower right behind his house, I'm sure the value of his house would go down. It's just logic. But that being said, if an appraiser does write up an appraisal based off of everybody's praised houses today versus having a cell phone tower, is the town going to pay the difference, or Verizon going to pay the difference? If there is indeed a difference. I mean, because I did get it in writing from a 31-year-old appraiser that says, hey, it's going to cost you 2.5 times or 2 times more money for me to appraise your house having a cell phone tower in your neighborhood versus not.
And Jeff, we certainly will take into account everything that you're submitting, as well as what Verizon's submitting, and weigh those as part of our decision. That's properly submitted, and we'll take that into account.
Hey, Mike, can I just ask one more question? Maybe two. In Verizon's RF study from October 6th, they said they would include the tower they are putting in the Agawam Golf Course. Has that been included in their analysis?
Yes, it has.
Okay.
My reading of it, I've seen maps, I've seen,
Okay.
And you know, I certainly asked them to do it. I think it was, I think I visually misunderstood the difference in height when you're coming over the mountain. I think that mountain is a pretty substantial to get over, to get down into Southwick.
This leads me to my second question. There is a parcel of land right across the street from us, less than a quarter of a mile away, between Calabrese Farm and the Agawam Bowman's Club, that's owned by the Mass Highway Department. It's a 76-acre parcel, not within the Verizon overlay district, but that can be changed very easily. It sits high above this neighborhood. It's less than a quarter of a mile away. It's 76 acres in the middle of nowhere. I've hunted there. I walked my dog there. Why hasn't that parcel been considered? Also, right behind that parcel, I believe there is a strip of land owned by the water department that runs right along the Agawam border in the same vicinity. Why has that not been evaluated?
Well, I can pretty confidently tell you the answer from Verizon. It's going to be because it's not in the wireless district. But you know, if let me just see if I can quickly pop those up to take a look. You know, I mean, if they're properties that may very well fit, similar to Mr. LaQuarrie's or similar to Pioneer Dairy, that
it's actually better than LaQuarrie's property. It sits right above our neighborhood.
Okay. What I would suggest, Dave, is that if you could pull the property info and just send it to, you know, Alan or myself, we can pass that on to Verizon.
Okay. Do you have an email address that I can reach you guys at?
Sure. For some reason I had in my head that you already had, but you can certainly email me. Mine is MikeDoherty@hotmail.com.
At hotmail.com. Okay, I will do. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Oh, hey, can I just ask one more? I know I'm really pushing this. The cell tower that is located on Southwick Hill Road. I know I have been there 3 or 4 times. I have interviewed residents of that neighborhood, and nobody knows of this cell tower. I can't find it. I know other residents or abutters to this property have been there looking for the cell tower. Nobody can find it. Can Verizon give us some information on it? And is this a potential site that could be improved, the tower height increased to satisfy the deficit in reception that Verizon claims to have? And by the way, I'm on this Zoom call walking around the neighborhood, and I've got 4 bars. So that's my final for tonight.
All right. I don't, do you want to address that, Attorney Fenton? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I fully understood the question. If it could be restated.
Okay. The question is this. There is a cell tower that you identify on your RF map on Southwick Hill Road. I have been there 3 or 4 times looking for this tower. I have my neighbors have been there looking for this tower. We have talked to neighbors of that neighborhood. They cannot find it. They don't know of this tower. If this tower exists, and can it be elevated to cover the gap that you say exists in the area you're trying to satisfy?
I understand. So we'll have Mr. Latore respond to that specifically. Jay, if you have the ability to share your screen, you can show the tower that we're talking about.
Yep, I'd be happy to answer the question, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to share my screen once more. Bear with me. So actually, I think I'll do this view. I think this will be helpful.
Mike, the tower that they're talking about is not on Southwick Hill. It's on, you can see it from College Highway behind the Key Bank. And it also has accessibility off of Tannery Road.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that tower.
And there is, And there is one off of Industrial Road where the transfer station is.
Well, I'm aware of that one. I mean, are we at this stage of the game, are we still unaware of where these cell towers are? Because the cell towers you have identified, we know where they are. The cell tower that Verizon is identifying at Southwick Hill Road is not there, all right? Or if it's there, it's perfectly hidden because nobody knows of it.
I think they're
Jay,
referring to, go ahead.
Jay, would you just please explain the Southwick Hill site, please?
Yes. Thank you for the question. It's possible that the matter is just the naming of our facilities. We have a facility that Verizon refers to internally as Southwick Hill, Massachusetts, and that is the facility that is off Industrial Road. There is a Southwick Hill, presumably road, within the town of Southwick off of College Highway, and there is no existing Verizon facility, and to the best of my knowledge, no tower on a Southwick Hill Road. And I'm presuming that the matter is just a function of how the facilities are named. The facilities and how they're named does not directly correlate to the streets that we're on. But we have provided in our testimony, both written and public, all of the existing facilities within the town of Southwick that Verizon is co-located on or has antennas on today, as well as facilities that are outside of the town of Southwick, but are in close enough proximity to influence Verizon's coverage within the town of Southwick.
Thank you, Jay.
Just so I looked quickly, and I think I see the property that Dave is talking about, which is 305 Feeding Hills Road. If you do want to address that, I think it certainly has the height to it, and it is owned by the Highway Department, and it's just a wooded parcel up there going up the mountain. So I think that's the property he's referring to. Okay, so I think what we have to figure out at this point in time, there are a few things for Verizon to address at the next meeting. I am going to get an opinion from town council to help guide us with some of these issues. And we do need to talk about doing the balloon float and how that needs to be done. So board members, do you have opinions that you want to offer or questions or comments about the balloon float and the parameters of that as far as when and how and what's going up there?
I would say the balloon should be placed at 120 feet. That's the maximum that we're talking about. The monopole will probably be 116 plus 4 for the antennas, but I would include those antennas, which are about 12 feet in diameter, I believe, as part of the tower. So the height that the balloon would be at would be 120.
The balloon base, Mike.
Yeah, the residents would disagree with that.
So let me just talk to the board first, and we'll go from there. Any other board members?
What size of that balloon be? Would it be a regular balloon or what size are you looking at?
I can tell you, my understanding is that the structure is going to be a triangle platform that is 12 to 16 feet on each side. And I can't remember what the height of that platform is. I'm sure someone from Verizon can fill me in, but you know, what I have in my head is you have a 3-sided triangle that is 12 to 16 feet on each side, of reasonably solid material. I think there may be gaps in there, you know, but
And
you know,
again, Mike, I don't believe the balloon should
Dave,
be floated until we establish how high this tower is going to be
Okay,
under
so-
4609A
Dave,
or 6409A.
I want to take certain steps, and I get that. That can be finalized before it happens. So let me just speak to the board first, and then we can talk more about it. So, you know, I guess in my head, I see that as being the structure that's going up there, and you need something representative of what that structure is to be able to visualize what is going to be there. So, I mean, that's my starting place, is it has to be something that resembles that. But I'm happy to hear other comments from the board, just so we can see where we're at, and then take some other comments from Verizon and the public.
I agree with Marcus on the 120 foot height of the balloon. I mean, I appreciate, and I share Dave's concern about the, whatever it's 4609A. In my mind, you know, 120 feet is still the max underneath, you know, our bylaws that that tower should be allowed to be. And as far as, you know, the height, the size of the balloon, you know, I mean, I don't know how practical it is to get a 12-foot diameter balloon up there, but if that's possible, I think that would be ideal.
Okay.
It definitely needs to be put out so everybody has an opportunity to see exactly what's going on a day in which they're home.
Yeah, that'd be my other thing, is make sure that the timing of it is such that it maximizes the ability of everybody to see it, and the duration of the balloon photo is long enough so that everybody's got a good long time to observe it.
Do y'all have any suggestions on a little more specific with that, as far as dates and, you know, weekdays, weekends, length of time that it's up there, that kind of thing?
I don't know how long a balloon test usually lasts, but I think it would be more than sufficient to have it go from Friday to Monday so that everybody has an equal opportunity, whether they're at work over the weekend. But I don't know how long that can be done for.
I don't think it's sort of up there for, you know, overnight, and yeah, I think it's done for a period of time on a days, I guess. You know, that's my understanding, but you know, I don't know that.
Anybody on the Verizon team have an answer for it?
So a few things. We traditionally fly a balloon of 4 feet in diameter. I don't have any experience with our consultants dealing with any balloons larger than that. The balloon would be visible from all locations that the tower would be visible. And we would, if the board requests, agree to prepare additional simulations so that the board could see what the tower would look like from those various vantage points, as we've already submitted some in our application packet. In terms of timing, we would be open to suggestions for when the board would like us to do it, and the length of time during the day. A Friday to a Monday would be a very, very lengthy balloon float. I don't have any experience in dealing with Verizon and all the applications that we filed having a balloon float for that long. But we would agree to do it for a reasonable period of time. And we also want to remind the board that as we enter winter and the weather conditions become more severe, we would need to also have the opportunity to have what I'll refer to as rain dates, but it's really much more than rain. Anytime that the wind is above 10 miles an hour, we cannot effectively float the balloon.
Okay.
Can you expand on what reasonable length of time is in your estimation, Attorney Fenton?
Well, that's a business decision. I will tell you that the bylaw does not require that we float a balloon again. We're happy to do so at the board's request. It is an expense to my client, so I'd have to speak with Verizon about how much of that expense they were willing to absorb in order to proceed with the balloon float. So We may need some time to get back to you on that. If you're asking for a float from a Friday to Monday, certainly 2 days would be reasonable. Anything more than that, I think I would need to speak directly with the client about the cost associated with that. And I would submit, Mr. Chair, that 2 days should be more than sufficient for people to view it and for us to have an opportunity to take the pictures we need.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in my head, I had that as, you know, if you did it on a Friday and a Saturday, right? I think that kind of covers both weekday and weekend, or you did it on a, you know, Tuesday and a Saturday or something. I mean, whatever it is, I don't know.
We would agree to that. We would agree to that.
I think that probably covers it. But I'm certainly willing to hear about, hear comments otherwise, but I think that would cover it for most people, as long as it's a sufficient length of time during each of those days, you know, where people could see it if they're home early or home late.
But Mike, could we agree that the balloon float doesn't happen until we agree about what the potential maximum height of this tower can be? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
Listen, we get your point. And I appreciate it if you just let us, as a board, try to figure out some basic parameters of this so we can start to move forward. Because, and I will tell you this too, I think I saw a question in the comments. There is a time frame when we need to get this done by. There is. I mean, it's we only have a certain amount of time to get this done. It's not a short period of time, but we have a period of time where we have to get this done in from the time it started. And so, you know, I would like to start to move things along so that we are staying within that. So
Michael,
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a suggestion. Our consultants are telling me that mornings are generally a better time for floats for weather purposes. So, you know, if you want to pick 2 days on a calendar, say, as you said, maybe a Tuesday and a Saturday, we would propose to do the float from 8 a.m. till noon on both days. Obviously subject to the input of the board, but that's what we would propose.
I mean, I would, my inclination would be to lengthen those hours a little bit, but
Mike, can I make a comment?
And I'm seeing, I mean, I'm certainly can hear comments. I'm putting it on a weekday and a weekend to accommodate, you know, various different schedules that people may have. If people think that a weekday is going to be pretty much useless, then I'm more than happy to, you know, try to maximize the weekend days. But I'm trying to get it so that everybody can see it and have the opportunity. Ryan?
Mike, I joined a little late. I can say for the town, the residents, we've spent countless hours on these calls. And quite frankly, we still don't have a clear explanation on why there isn't another suitable location in a commercial area. And before Verizon wastes countless dollars on a balloon float, I think all of us would like a better explanation on why the other locations aren't suitable in another commercial location and not in the middle of a residential neighborhood that brings in the most tax revenue for the town.
So I guess let me offer my thoughts on that, and then Verizon can certainly hop in. But I am trying to accomplish a couple things. One is, you know, as Attorney Fenton did note, you know, the farther along we get, it's slightly more difficult to, you know, conduct these, and you may have to postpone it a number of times with weather and what have you. My thought was to try to get to a point where you have trees that are, you know, as minimal amount of leaves as you can get, you know, sometime in early December, mid-December. You're not dealing with holidays. You have leaves off the trees and you can get a decent sense of what's going to be there. You know, what you risk in the way you structure it, I mean, your idea is that there can be a decision without the balloon float, and maybe that is, but I'm not sure I see the reason why you wouldn't at least factor in the balloon float to whatever the decision may be, because you only get one shot at it.
I
Right.
think everyone's against this and there's a cost to it. So why not vet out every other location before investing in a cost for this? No one wants this. It's evident. We're all on the call for a reason.
And I guess I'd open up to the board as to whether, at least with the board, whether they want to see a balloon float.
Yeah, and Mike, to Dave's point, we need to answer the first question of where is the balloon going to be, you know, what the height is going to be, I think.
Let me open up to the board whether they want a balloon float or not.
I think it is prudent and fair to all sides that we ask for this balloon test because of the time frame that it's going to take for it to be completed. And my layman's understanding, and maybe the answer to everybody's question regarding why we're going to do this before considering other locations, is that Verizon isn't going to consider any other locations until we give them a decision on this location, which we cannot do until we take all the information in that we need. And that includes a balloon test done, not simulations, but balloon tests done at appropriate times and for the lengths of times that everybody, including us on the board, can have to see whether or not this structure as proposed would in fact be a visual impairment and decline to the neighborhood. I'm not suggesting that I don't believe that to be the truth, but this balloon test needs to happen so that we can in fact see that. That's just my understanding of it. Fair, Mike?
Yeah, and I do want to, you know, emphasize, I think almost everybody who has spoken from, you know, the abutters and folks who live near here have been against this. And I think that that's probably a pretty accepted fact at this point in time. I don't think there's anybody who's disputing that. That alone doesn't I can't, you know, the board can't sit here and write a decision that says the residents don't want it, therefore you don't get the special permit. I mean, I can tell you that that doesn't work. I mean, that's not what we have to do. That's not what the bylaws, that's not what the federal laws put on us to do. So we have to go beyond that, and we have to look at what the, you know, evidence is, the impact on the residents, you know, evidence of the impact. And evidence of the impact is whether you can see it or not, you know, how visible it's going to be, what kind of deforestation is there, what it's going to do to house values. I mean, things like that are evidence of impact on residences, evidence of impact on the vistas. So if you can see this, you're not going to be able to see, you know, the view that you want to see. That's evidence of what you, of the impact. Just residents saying we don't want it, while certainly appreciated and certainly part of what a fact that we're, you know, I can't imagine us not finding, you need more than that. So that is why I was trying to move toward these things, because I think that they do contribute to the overall, you know, impact of what we need to find, which is, you know, how it impacts the residents and the vistas in town.
Mike, I have one last comment. I understand the opinion is irrelevant. It's the financial impact, the health impact, the safety impact. We've given you a lot of other evidence on why this shouldn't be here, and everyone's neglected all of this. No one's responded to any of Corey's presentation tonight.
And again, I suspect there'll be you know, I assume some response to it by next time when they've had a chance to consider it and respond to it. But, you know, again, that's up to Verizon to make the decision as to how they wish to respond to it. You've clearly made, you know, I speak only for myself, but you know, Corey has certainly, and the rest of you who are involved in that certainly have put forward a number of things to consider. And, you know, there's letters and whatever else in there, studies that can be considered. So I don't want to minimize that by any stretch of the imagination, but it's part of what we consider.
How about, last comment, how about the sound of Southwick's response, not Verizon's? That's what we're looking for.
What does that mean?
We're not interested in Verizon's response to our comments. We want to hear of the town of Southwick and your responses to our concerns.
To the presentation that was made? So,
yes,
I'll tell you, and I've said this to a number of folks, I think, my feeling on it, having, one, being an attorney, having read just about every case there is out there on cell towers in Massachusetts and the federal courts, that govern Massachusetts, to me, the issue is you have a site where you're having substantial residential impact, vista impact, whatever you want to call it, the whole litany of things that are under our bylaws. All of those, in my mind, are substantially impacted by the siting of this where it is. I don't think there's that much disagreement about that. The problem is that under federal law, if there is a coverage gap, they have the right to fill that in some manner. And so to me, the issue right now is alternate sites and whether any of those reasonably exist. That's the issue. And so, and again, I want people to be able to express their opinions about things and how they feel about stuff. And it's certainly personal and it's certainly upsetting. And I want people to be able to express that. But, a lot of that, I think, is accepted fact at this point in time, right? I mean, they don't want it and there is an impact. And I don't think there's much to disagree about with that. The question is whether there is an alternative. And that's where my head's at. And I can only speak for myself, but that's where my questioning has been. And that's where my thinking is, because that's where I see the issue right now.
Mike, where are we on the clock? What's our time frame for getting this decision?
I have to, it's late and my brain is mush right now, but I think it's 150 days, right, from the time of opening the hearing. There certainly wasn't, I forget how it applies, but there certainly wasn't any clock when there was suspension of deadlines. So I think the clock begins running when the hearing was opened, which was, when was that, September 20th? I forget.
So you're thinking the balloon float early December?
I think that you're probably not going to get it done before the next one, because there are, as Dave has pointed out, some issues to figure out exactly what the height's going to be and what you're going to do. I also think you got the holiday and that becomes problematic. I think when you get past early December, you're dealing with another, couple of holidays right there, and becomes problematic to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to do it. And then when you get into January and February, you start to have weather issues. And when you get past that, you're starting to deal with what's referred to as the shot clock here. You got that issue. So I think realistically,
first Tuesday and first Saturday in December. I would propose that.
Mike, do you mind if I jump in for a second? Chris Rooney?
Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, I was going to post a comment. Last meeting, it was discussed, I believe, and I thought it wasn't a big deal to Verizon that we had actually talked about doing the proposed one, and then they were agreeable to doing the 150 height as well. I didn't think that was an issue. That's at least what they had said.
We did not say that.
You didn't?
I think we had maybe talked about putting something up above it that was higher to deal with the antenna, but I could be wrong on that. Maybe I'd
Would they be agreeable to do the two heights? Because the max,
we would not agree to fly a balloon higher than our proposed tower height.
I think that's bridge to cross more when I get opinion from town council as to how that applies, right? I mean, I think let's deal with what they have to say when we're dealing with that issue.
But based on the setback, the maximum height is 120 feet.
That's right.
But again,
Because if it's over 120 feet, proposed to over 120 feet, we can't approve it. Our decision is not to approve it.
the problem, Marcus, as I understand it, and I don't know the law very well, but having looked at it, briefly, there is a federal law which allows for, Dave is correct, where it's 10% or, he said it, I think, correctly, which is, you can go up to 20 feet from, something below it or something like that, whatever it is. But there's a federal law which basically says they can come in for a modification. The only thing we can do is make sure that they fit under that federal statute. And other than that, we can't do anything. We can't apply setbacks. We can't apply any of that. That's the way my brief looking at it is. And that's why we're going to get a town council opinion, is because I think that that's, something that needs to be considered, or at least done with some sort of knowledge. I mean, I sort of in my head am correlating this to the medical marijuana citing, right? If you cited a medical marijuana facility, I think that recreational had an automatic right. They had an automatic right to do recreational sales or something like that. There was some tie there that I have a vague memory of it. I'm sure Doug Moglen, who was doing all that, knows it better than I do. But there's when you sort of tie two rights together, to me, it's an issue. And so I do want to have an opinion on that and see where that goes.
Michael, could I just bring up something also?
Yes, Alan.
We also, the applicant would have to send certified mail to the surrounding areas that are affected. So that's another thing to keep in mind with the scheduling of the balloon test.
Say that again.
The applicant, Verizon Wireless, would have to send certified mail to all of the people that are affected in accordance with the rules and regulations. So they know what's happening. It's just something that they have to prepare. They just don't go fly a balloon if nobody really knows that it's going up.
No, and let me just make sure I understand, because I'm not saying that that's a bad idea by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just wondering where the requirement comes from.
Well, that's what we required the last time, and the town doesn't have the budget to go ahead and do that unless the town did it, and then Verizon would reimburse us. But it's better to put the nemesis on them if they can't fly it one particular day. Because we had that one problem at the very beginning of the meetings.
So let's.
Mr. Chair, if I can respond to that just for a second.
Go ahead.
There is no balloon float requirement in the bylaw. Verizon is happy to work with the planning board, and if you would like us to send notice by whatever means, we're happy to do it. We just need to be instructed.
Yep. And so I guess where I'm happy to hear about days or issues or whatever, but looking quickly at the calendar from what I just mentioned before about a Tuesday and a Saturday, I would wonder whether we sort of tentatively schedule it for December 8th and December 12th, and then at a December 1 meeting, try to nail down exactly what the specifications are. My question would be whether that's enough time for Verizon between the 1st and the 8th to get that, whatever we deal with on the 1st, whether that's enough time to sort of turn it around.
That is pretty far in advance, Mr. Chair. We would ask for a much sooner balloon float than that. That's getting right into the thick of problematic season for weather.
Well, I don't know how reasonably it'd be done before that, especially with the issues that are outstanding, and our next meeting is not until December 1st. You also have to factor in the holiday. So I think that that's the first realistic time frame. My question is really just whether 1 week is a sufficient turnaround time. If we talk about one, everybody be prepared to talk about the specifications of what that balloon float is going to look like, and then try to finalize it on the 1st. Is that going to be enough turnaround time for you to get that ready to go?
David Vivian, would you like to respond to that, please?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I'm David Vivian. I'm with Structure Consulting Group, and I represent Verizon on this matter. The weather gets worse and worse as the weeks progress, and typically that's why we always want to do about a 4-hour float in the early morning, usually 8 to 12. The longer you go into the season, the worse the weather's going to get. And so you're going to end up with weather cancels, because anything over 5 to 10 mile an hour, the balloon's going to get up above the tree canopy and then flop over on the trees.
So we have those constraints, Mr. Chair. In terms of turnaround, we can turn it around that quickly if you tell us. We're just
here's what jumps to mind, I guess. Tell me if I'm wrong on this. The first balloon float you did in 2017 was in January, wasn't it?
I don't have that date in front of me.
Okay.
It was February.
February. I mean, I think it's feasible to get it done during that time frame. I think you are. I don't disagree with you that you're potentially causing, or a delay of some sort, for weather, and that's a little bit more of a risk. But, especially when it's been in the 70s the last few days, I think
we would have liked to. Yeah,
have a decent shot on December 8th and December 12th. But
so Mr. Chair, if I may, when that balloon float took place, and I don't have the date in front of me, that was not a noticed or public balloon float in the same way you're proposing. So in this situation, we're cognizant of the fact that we're going to be notifying people through this meeting and possibly otherwise about a date and time, and we will be bound by whatever we notify people. And when we're doing a float just for our own purposes for simulations, we can always adjust and tell our consultant, look at the weather and pick the day that works this week. That's not available to us in this context. That's why I'm addressing it.
I agree that there's logistical issues. But I think there's also logistical issues from our end of both fairness and trying to get answers on heights and things like that it's just not going to realistically happen until, say December 8th and 12th. So that would be my suggestion. Anybody on the board disagree with those dates?
No.
Any members of the public have any disagreement or issue with those dates? And yes, we will work on details before that date. So that's what we'll be doing at December 1st meeting.
Michael, I want to thank you for addressing those concerns, ensuring that the heights are nailed down and that we get answers on alternate locations. Thank you.
All right, so I think we will, tentatively talk about the 8th and the 12th. We will certainly nail stuff down at the December 1st meeting. We will get, rain dates or whatever you want to call them. We will get we will talk about the heights and what size of balloon and things like that. While I do want to actually see what's going to be up there, I guess I'm trying to understand the process and whether you can actually get something that large up there when it's still treed, right? So I do want to just better understand what can go up there right now to be seen without tearing down trees over there, because that kind of defeats the purpose. So there are some constraints, but I do want to get as representative a an object up there so that people can see what would be there if this tower went up there.
We will have a consultant at the next meeting who can speak directly to the maximum diameter given the circumstances.
Okay.
And regarding the 8th and the 12th, Mr. Chair, if that's your will, given the constraints we explained, we'll proceed on that basis. I do want to say, though, that while it's possible for us to turn around the float between the 1st and the 8th, based on your discussions on the 1st, it may not be possible to turn around the notices you might require. And so I just want to flag that issue for you. If you have a meeting on the 1st and you want us to send certified notice to all abutters before the 8th, that really does not give me a very big window to be able to do that.
Figure it out.
Yeah, and hold on, let me just pull this up. I mean, it's a fair issue and it's not your issue, right? I mean, you don't care. It's an issue you're, I think, trying to be fair to the town so that everybody gets the opportunity to look at it.
That's right.
I guess I would say that perhaps we have a meeting on Tuesday the 1st. Perhaps just tweaking that slightly to the 12th and the 15th, right? So that's still a Saturday and a Tuesday. Again, I'm just sort of randomly picking dates, but and the 15th, I believe we have a meeting. And so some of that can be addressed at the meeting. Unless it makes sense to do it the day before, right? So that people have time to process things and kind of address it at the meeting. So maybe doing it on the 12th and the 14th, which is a Saturday and a Monday, would allow people to see it either on a weekend or a weekday. We then would have a meeting on December 15th. And so, at least some of that can be addressed at that meeting. And give people.
The only, what's to be decided on the float, it's only the height, not any of the other configuration, right?
I think the size of it. I mean, like I said, you're talking about a structure that's triangular, that's up to 16 by 16 by 16, right? I mean, it's not an insignificant structure that's going to be up there. To me, I have seeing a 4-foot balloon is not necessarily going to give me that visualization. And I don't think it's fair to put it on the residents to have to simulate what that 4-foot balloon would look like and face complaints that, oh, you're trying to enlarge it too much, or you're doing this or you're doing that. I mean, I don't, having what's actually there would be the best thing, I think, but that's just me. The other thing that Doug Moglen of the select board just texted to me, which is that we now have that, like it or don't like it, the robocall option that, that this could be sent out by robocall to the folks in town, that they could learn about the balloon floats. And if there are any kind of changes to it and you have to go to a rain date, that could be done that way as well. So,
great.
But, all right, so let's plan on doing that and, addressing the issues that we previously talked about. Anything else that needs to be discussed before we can close this up here?
What was the date again? The 12th?
I think the 12th and the 14th, which is a Saturday and a Monday, and that would allow us before our meeting on the 15th to have some kind of data there and deal with it there and move this along.
Mr. Chair, I think a few times you've asked us to respond to the PowerPoint presentation. That we'll need to have that made available to us in order to do that.
Of course, and we'll get that over to you to do that.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike.
Yes,
Yes, this is Bill. Mike, if you have some time, I have a concern I'd like to express and a observation I'd like to share.
Sure, and this is going to be it because it's getting late, so I'd like to get people to wrap this up.
The concern we have is that the shot clock provides 150 days from date of application. By my informal calculation, I think we're getting into 90 days of this. So my concern is, what are the implications if our discussions continue to prolong the decision? Do we by default render the decision to allow Verizon to come in with a tower? So I just ask to keep that in mind. I'm not looking for an answer now. Perhaps you can cover it at the next meeting. That's a concern. My observation also is, through this discussion tonight, we've revealed that through the federal guideline, the tower can be extended by 30 feet at the will of the cell phone provider. In this case, it's Verizon. So taking that into account and applying it to an alternate location, if that alternate location, the original height is below 120 feet, in the future, no argument can be made to disallow the extension of that height for another 30 feet or whatever. Thereby, my observation is that that alternate site becomes viable. There is no setback requirement that it challenges that extension, and now it becomes a viable solution under the consideration of the federal guideline, not under the consideration of the bylaw. So I would just make that observation. I'd like you, perhaps, and the board, to keep that in mind, to see if that is a viable discussion to be had when making a decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have a little bit different calculation in my head. I have February, I think it's 19th, something like that in my head, as far as when that runs. But it's certainly something we keep an eye on. We have to issue a decision by then. But it's also something that Verizon can, my understanding, and Attorney Fenton, correct me if I'm wrong, but they could, if they choose to consent to extend that. But I'm not saying they will, and I'm not saying they need to. I'm just saying I think they can, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
We do have the authority to do that.
So, all right. So with that, I would entertain a motion to continue this. Are we talking 7:15 on the what's the next date? The 1st of December. Yeah. Thank you.
Michael, we do have that one A&R on the Kellogg property that we should try to sneak in before.
So just put that on at 7:06, and we'll put this on for 7:15.
Okay.
Okay. So do I hear a motion to continue this to December 1st at 7:15?
Marcus Phelps makes the motion.
Do I hear a second?
Dave Spina, second.
Dave Spina, second. Do I roll call vote? Michael Doherty, aye.
Marcus Phelps, aye.
Nothing, aye.
David Sutton, aye.
Dave Spina, aye.
Jessica Thornton, aye.
Okay. So we'll see everybody on December 1st.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have anything else for this evening? I'll spend a couple more hours on stuff, or are we good?
Good night.
Michael, do you want to give out the invite information? I know you've done that in the past.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. That's my fault. If people want to hang on quickly, I can just pop that into the chat. But again, I'll certainly post it on Facebook as well, but give me 1 second.
Hey, Mike, also, this is Jeff King. When do you think Verizon's appraisal document will be on the website? If not, is there a way you could send it to me?
I can do that. I expect it's going to be up soon, but Jeff, I will just get me your email and I'll shoot it over to you.
No worries. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Shoot, what did I? Megan, I just sent you that, right? Didn't I?
Yeah, you did. Hold on.
No, it's okay. Oh, here we go. All right. So let me just type it in here. Everyone. It's just so if anybody's listening, it's 865-703-7195 is the meeting ID, and the password is 343 490.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay. Anything else, board members, that we have? No. Do I hear a motion?
The motion, close the meeting.
Do I hear a second?
It's been a second.
We'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor, Michael Doherty, aye.
Marcus Phelps, aye.
Jeff Singer, aye.
David Sutton, aye.
Dave Spina, aye.
Jessica Thornton, I.
All right. Have a good evening.
Thanks all.
Okay.